And welcome to the live stream. A very different time on this occasion in the evening. We've had a few requests actually to do an evening live stream, and here we are. I'm not going to make it a habit because I had to change things around a lot, and indeed I had a meeting that was quite important this morning, so I couldn't actually do the live stream in the morning slot. So here we are in the evening, and we got a little bit of a different background as well, kind of, trying to get with it, trying to get with the times. So we'll see how it goes. This reflects, of course, the 2026 Formula One season. And you can see in the background there, powertrain, aero, strategy, three key elements, I think, of what Formula One's going to be featuring in 2026. Whether we'll ever get to understand any of it, or whether the teams will even get to understand any of it, is another matter. I was chatting to an engineer last night about the whole push to pass business, saying it's not actually just push to pass, is it? Because it's push to defend as well. And he said, yeah, it's all a complete mess. Nobody really knows how it's going to go. So, yeah, I mean, nothing new under the sun there. Yes, the Audi Formula One team is now officially on the road, I guess you could say. We had a dramatic picture of the car in its 26 livery. There you see it in all its glory. Well, it's not actually the car. I say the car, it's actually the show car, which is the car that was in the Audi lobby for most of last year, and indeed probably for some of this year already, in the lobby, by the trophy area, kind of, I guess, getting everybody fired up about it. And, Audi coming out with quite a lot of impressive statements at the launch. I'm going to read one of them here. Different, you got to say different here. This is a quote from, I don't know who, Audi's new design philosophy: clear, technical, intelligent, emotional. I mean, what would Colin Chapman make of all that? He'd probably say clear. Well, most race car designs are clear. It's pretty clear. This is where the wishbone goes. This is where the front upright goes. We don't want anything too cluttered. And we've got computers these days, so it will be pretty clear. Technical. Well, yeah, I hope it's technical, and they're not going to just race the show car. No, I'm sure they won't, because the actual race car, I've got to say, in credit to Audi, has actually done a few miles. I think it's probably best to say rather than laps. I've done a few laps somewhere, but I don't think it went quite as well as it could have. Let's put it that way. Then the next one is intelligent design philosophy. What does that mean? That means they're not employing dunces. Well, okay, good. I'm not sure how many engineers there are at Audi that have got a lot of Formula One road dust on them. I'm sure Jonathan Wheatley's got a new plan for that, and that's probably why he's setting up his technical centre in Bicester in England, another technical centre. But at the moment, I would have said there's not a lot of Formula One road dust engineering in that team. And emotional. Oh, wow, they're going to be emotional. What does that mean? Passionate, I guess. I think that's a modern word to replace passionate, isn't it? You got to love your racing. You got to keep racing anyway. I'm being a little bit cynical only because I'm getting a little bit tired already of all these livery launches and aren't we wonderful and rah, 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 and we're going to do it differently and this and that. It is only a race team and it is only a racing car. And we are only talking about Formula One. It's not save the planet overall here. Of course, we're all trying to do our bit. And I just think it's all a bit over the top, really, I suppose, what I'm getting at. And I think the other thing, before we go into questions and comments, that I'd like to add is that, yet again, there's got this cop-out thing with Audi, and no doubt we'll get it from Cadillac as well. In Audi's case, they're saying, well, it's at least a 5-year plan before we can really expect to be up there and doing what we want to do as a team. 5 years? I mean, give me a break. Ross Brawn was the same when he went to various teams, and he always delivered well under 5 years. I mean, talk about giving yourself a lot of fudge factor. And this isn't a brand new team anyway. It's not as if it's starting from scratch like Cadillac. It's actually a team that did reasonably well last year, and got that podium, didn't it? And wasn't too bad, and it's getting better. It's a good race team. We got Jonathan Wheatley. Why should it take 5 years? I mean, the engine, yes, they're doing their engine and powertrain, the whole thing, but so is everybody else to new regulations. And so that shouldn't be as big a disadvantage as it normally is for a new team on the block. And the same with the chassis. Everybody's got to do a new car. So why are they saying it's a 5-year program before they really get up and running? That, again, I'm a bit sick of all that stuff as well. Oh, it's going to take us 5, 10, 15 years before you can expect us to win. I mean, it just goes on. As I say, Cadillac, you can kind of give them a pass because it is a new operation. And no doubt they will be saying that 5 years, I would imagine. But in Audi's case, that's not an excuse. And if they're not doing reasonably well by the end of this year, I think collectively, we, the observers, the fans, should be giving me a little bit of a hard time, because a huge budget, huge company, lots of technology in theory, lots of intelligence, lots of emotion. Yeah, they should be doing a little bit better. Anyway, got that off my chest. What else? Any other thing? Apropos, absolutely nothing at all, other than thinking about Frank Williams. And thank you very much indeed for all your comments on the video we posted with that additional footage from Charlie Lucas. Posted it earlier this week, just before the weekend, actually, on the back of my description of Frank's road accident. I was just thinking about Frank today. I've just been down at the golf course with Jack, and we're just walking back to the car, and I was thinking about Frank. And I said to Jack, I said, because he was showing me a picture of a new, I think it's a C-Class AMG Merc, which looks quite nice. And he did all the sort of options. And, oh, would you like this, Dad? What color? You know? So I was looking at all that, and I said, what's that on the front? And it's a huge, massive, great Mercedes thing on the front of the grille, you know, literally sort of this big, and presumably it lights up at night as well. And I said, well, I wouldn't want that. I'd get that in black, or I'd get it delivered without that. Why do I want a huge Mercedes thing on the front? He said, oh, well, yeah, do you realize at Ferrari now you can pay an extra 10,000 if you want to have the Ferrari logo painted on the car, hand painted? I said, well, you know, do you remember that? Well, you should know that Frank Williams, when he was buying Ford Cosworth Formula One engines to go racing with that engine, like a lot of other British teams, that was the sort of, you know, the bedrock of Formula One in those days, having a Cosworth engine supply, and it was 5 or 6 engines in a season. Frank's philosophy was, I'm paying Cosworth to sell me these engines. Why should I put Ford on the cam covers? I'm not getting any sponsorship from Ford. I'm not getting any freebies from Ford. They're not helping me with the engine cost at all. And so he literally used to have the Ford logo shaved off the cam covers of the DFEs. And if you look at that's how you can tell a Frank Williams engine, a Cosworth engine. It won't have the Ford logo on there. And I just thought, he's absolutely right. You know, why do people spend a fortune, probably their whole life savings, buying one of these AMG Mercs to go around advertising the Mercedes brand when they're not even getting a discount? I don't get it. I just really don't get it. You know, they've given that fair quid pro quo. Here's the car, here's the money. What's all this logo stuff? And that ties in a little bit with all these launches, these pre-season launches, the livery, the logos, this and that, new livery. Usually they're touching something that doesn't really need to be changed. And I certainly think that's the case in rallying, and particularly with Hyundai. I can't believe how they've changed the livery on the Hyundai rally cars. And yeah, there's all that sort of stuff on the side, you know, it's probably quite good, you know, that's the turbo overrun or whatever. But they've changed the shade, I think, of the orange, which was just perfect. And the whole look of the car is not quite the same now. That livery they had the last couple of years was absolutely perfect for the shape of the car. Now that's gone. Toyota have gone from their sort of carbon black to red and white, but it's not quite the right red, in my opinion. It's a bit crimsony. Why do they keep doing these things? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like this constant touching. I suppose all these PR agencies, media agencies, ad agencies have to keep earning their money by coming up with all this new stuff. And don't get me started on the new driver's overalls at Hyundai, that sort of split down the middle of 2 colors. They were absolutely brilliant last year, how they combined all the colors in the driver's overalls. And now that just that color split they've got, reminds me with a shudder of the Craig Pollock BAT 555 Lucky Strike logos, when they tried to do that car with the 2 different logos. Remember? And Bernie just said, spin me another yarn, that ain't even going to get to the grid. Craig hadn't read the rules that you weren't allowed to have a split livery on the car. And the driver's overalls from memory were the same. I think it had, there was something about that. The driver's overalls at the time, they had that split down the middle and it looked absolutely terrible. Anyway, there we go. So lots of good things happening as well. I'll think of them as we go along. I've been watching a bit of the New Zealand regional series, Castrol Toyota series. Pretty good. Callie's struggling a bit, isn't he? But then again, I don't suppose he's expecting that much. It's just to get some racing mileage. But Ugo's doing well. A few other guys doing very well too. Push to pass in that. I don't think it's very nice, and it's not, that's where this whole push to pass conversation came from. I don't think it works in that category, and if it doesn't work there, I can't see how it's going to be great in Formula One either. Why do they have to do that? Oh, here's a bit of good news. I knew there would be something. There's a new Formula 3 championship starting. Actually, I think it's based in Spain. There are two races in Spain this year, one in Barcelona at the end of the year, and hopefully one at the Mad Ring, the New Madrid circuit. And it's a brand new Dallara chassis, which is good, a proper racing car again, which is great for Formula 3. No push to pass, none of the gimmicks. But here's the punchline: the championship is actually going to be owned by the race teams, as distinct from some third party, rights holder. And that's, I think, a very healthy thing. So the teams get a share of the profits of the championship. And yeah, the budgets are relatively high, 1 million, but you know what they are for Formula 3, FIA Formula 3 are? Do you know what a budget is to run a Formula 3 season now? 2 million euros for FIA Formula 3. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And that's why we have so many drivers there who are basically financed by their families. And the standard of driving, of course, is debatable at best. Anyway, there we go. All of that. Live stream. Let's get on with it, Peter, and let's see where we're at with your comments. And just another thing before we get on to that, I tried last week to I tried a different thing, and I went on to the communities page of our channel at the end of the live stream or the day after, whatever. And there were several questions that I wasn't able to get to answer purely because we ran out of time. And I actually tried to answer those on the communities page. So if you guys like that, I'll continue to do it. I think I'll spread it out a bit differently. I'll probably put 4 or 5 questions on one plate, as it were, and give an answer to all of them. So they're maybe a little bit easier to read. I mean, that whole community thing's a little bit, the way it's set up, it's not that user friendly at the moment, I don't think, visually speaking. But anyway, and no doubt that will develop as well. But I think the community page thing is going quite well. Anyway, there we go. Here we are. And let's have a look at the first question from comments. One of our regulars. Thank you very much. I'm interested to see how many different comments we get, different viewers we get based on this different time, this evening time. But no doubt here that we have Ashad Chowdhury, one of our regulars. Hi, Mr. Windsor. How do you see Audi's progress so far? Will they win a Grand Prix this rules cycle? Well, they should. They should win more than a Grand Prix. They're Audi, they're Auto Union, to put it in its motor racing perspective. I mean, what would I better not mention his name, but what would the German chancellor at the time, who was financing Audi and Mercedes, Auto Union and Mercedes in the 1930s, think if I don't know who the team manager of Auto Union was, actually. Why don't I know that? I have no idea. If he said to the chancellor, well, yeah, but it is a 5-year program, do not expect any results for at least 5 years, you can imagine what would have happened. Anyway, yeah, a bit different today, of course. How will they go? I don't know. I mean, Jonathan Wheatley for me is the guy there, and he's not stupid by any means, and he's a racer, and he will understand. He will be able to see already where all the blockages are in the system, engineering wise and otherwise, production wise, with the car and the engine and the gearbox, and he'll be pretty good at plugging those holes and freeing up the gaps and creating freedom of movement. But it won't be easy, that's for sure. And as I say, I don't see a lot of good Formula One people there. There may be some good people there, but they're not good Formula One people, and that's always a bit of a problem, I think. So in answer to your question, they should. That's all I can say. And if they haven't won a race this year, I'll give them a hard time, because they're Audi, for Pete's sake. They should be up there doing well. And none of this 5-year business. I'm not giving them any. I'll give them about half a season. 2/3. There you go. 2/3 of a season. That's all they're going to get from me. Same gentleman, Ashad Chowdhury. Would you be able to obtain legal pics, videos of races from Formula One to offer your commentary? I feel they will enhance the brilliant insight you give us each weekend even more. Well, it's very kind of you to say so. And the answer is yes, of course I could, but it would probably cost me about 25 million euros to do so. So that ain't going to happen. Even if I had 25 million, which I certainly don't, I wouldn't spend it on that. And, I'm not exaggerating. And everybody that runs any sort of action from Formula One, even retrospective, post 1971, is basically, without owning any of the rights, is basically breaking the rules. And that's why I don't go near that. And even with screen grabs from the TV, you're not allowed to do that either. in the fine print of everything you sign. And so I would love to, but I won't be. But we'll be doing our best to give you the backup to explain not necessarily what happened, but why things happened. And I think that's what we do, hopefully quite well. And I'm trying to enhance that whole chapter this year with some very good expert commentary, if that's the right word. Opinion probably is a better word. Once we've seen what has happened, an explanation of why it happened. So watch this space. But thank you very much indeed for that. Another regular. These time changes haven't put anybody down, have they? Sarosh Soman. Peter, you were saying that Vettel was having a V style of steering vehicle input. Can you explain this? And also, who are the other drivers who are driving similarly? Yeah, well, he did. I mean, what you're really asking me is the difference between Vettel and Max, I think. Say, let's take Max as one example of what I would call a great short corner driver. You could say Charles Leclerc as well. You could say Lewis at his peak, or Lewis pre-21, whichever way you want to talk about it. Or you could say Sterling Moss or Jim Clark or Alan Prost, all great short corner drivers. And many others too that I'm not mentioning right now. Nigel Mansell, Carlos Reutemann, two others. The difference between those drivers and Sebastian Vettel, and an immediate answer to your second part, is the two other drivers that, in my mind, are closest to the way Vettel drives were Jacques Lafitte and Jean Alesi. Is that whereas Max never really brakes in a straight line, he's turning the steering as he's starting to brake, and he's constantly increasing the steering load against the brake pedal pressure to get the cars to shorten the corner as much as possible and extending the straight, and that's his natural feel. Whereas Vettel brakes in a straight line, he turns the wheel probably about the same place as Max, but rather than keep the steering input, he's aiming already for a point on the outside of the corner, and he just brakes in a straight line very late down to that point. Very, very slow minimum speed, mid-corner speed, slower than Max on the same corner. And then he does a rotation at this slow speed, and then he just has a straight line exit. Very, very effective on some types of corner, and very effective in the wet, but not effective in long corners. That, I think, that was the biggest problem for Vettel, was long corners, long fast corners, whereas Max has got that ability, and Charles and Lewis, pre-21 Abu Dhabi, has that ability to continue to turn in even when they've got understeer. They can just perfectly balance the understeer with the rotation point they're going to. And whereas Vettel, I think another point here, whereas Vettel would brake down to the same rotation point on a corner where it suits him. And a good corner for Vettel was always Barcelona. If you go down the back straight, there was the hairpin left. Now it's slightly different, but then you accelerate along a straight, and then there's a long right-hander, which is starting to go back down the hill. That long right-hander was always a great corner for Vettel to do that Ving. But he would brake into the same V rotation point every lap, and it would be absolutely metronomic, very impressive to watch in terms of its replication, but not the same as Max, who's actually rotating at a slightly different point every corner, every lap, because everything's changing on the car, and he's making many more dynamic adjustments to the car than Vettel did, in my opinion and my view of how it was with Vettel. And so, yeah, and Jacques did the same thing, and Jean Alesi did the same thing, but it's kind of a rigid thing they do. It's a rigid V thing. It literally is a V. It doesn't work everywhere. And the other point, of course, is that the subtlety that Max needs in order to do what he does, everything is a curve with Max. There are very few straight lines in the way Max ever creates a corner. But because he has that subtlety, when he's in a change of direction situation, for example, left, right, very fast, Max also has the feel for, and I've just said he doesn't create straight line, but he has a very good feel for finding the moment of the least possible downside for loading up the car the other way. And it might be a millisecond, a fraction of a second, when if you could stop the footage of the car and what it's doing, you'd actually find the point when it's between the left and the right. And that's the moment he puts in the next bit of input. He never loads the car up before it's ready to take it. And that's part of his ability. That's why he's as good as he is on short corners. And he can use that in other ways. So he creates these little areas where he's just not loading the car up any more than necessary and keeping all the load out of the car, the lateral load. Whereas Vettel doesn't have that, never had that, in my opinion. He never had that change of direction feel that Max has got. There would be other things too, but I need to think about it a little bit more. But off the top of my head, they would be the key differences between the two. And of course, that's why you see guys like a Lazy and Vettel for that matter, but more Lazy and Lafitte in an era when they weren't in cars that were magically much better than the oppositions, occasionally having really good races because they were in situations with the car, with the circuit, with the combination of corners, with the tire grip, everything. It just worked for them, that V. And if it's working, it's a great way to drive. You know, another corner where you can do that quite well is that corner at Silverstone where they go down again, down the first long straight, you go through the left and then the next right. That next right is a good corner where Vettel was always very good there and getting the car rotated and a nice straight exit. Whereas a lot of drivers are sort of on exit and they've still got quite a load in the car because they've made the corner go on a bit longer. I mean, that was the one thing. Vettel didn't have long corners, generally speaking, but it was all very linear, as distinct from rotational, which it is in Max's case. So they were the differences. But it's a good question. Thank you very much for that. Another one from Sarosh. Peter, why did Senna think that Benetton was using illegal traction control, launch control? Also, was it proven if that was the case? Well, he thought that. But I mean, everybody had their suspicions at the time, not only Ayrton, but amongst up and down the pit lane. A lot of people would say, Benetton, and not only Benetton, some people, usually it's a usual Formula One thing. If one team's going very well and they're looking pretty good, they must be doing something dodgy. And there was a lot of talk up and down the pit lane. Yeah, but particularly focused around Benetton and the whole Michael thing there. He was very, very new and very scientific and very impressive. The whole thing looked very slick. But the whole thing came to a head in the race before Imola when Ayrton retired. And he stayed out on the circuit watching the race. And it was Aida in Japan. And he came back and basically said, well, I've been listening and watching the Benetton and for sure they've got traction control. You can hear the engine cutting and all the rest of it. Now, if you talk to engineers who were there at the time, Frank Durney is a good example. He says it's complete rubbish and that's how the engine sounded even when they weren't using traction control, blah, 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 blah. There are other things they were doing. And so that was, that's always speculative, I think. But you say, was it ever proven? Well, they did find software in the ECU that were related to launch control and traction control in forensic tests and examinations they did over the next 12 months. But there was no proof that it was ever used. And a good example of that argument was that they also found exactly the same software in a Williams black box. And Williams said the same thing. Oh, well, we just never used it. It was just there and discarded sort of thing, but we just didn't take the code out. So there was no proof is the answer to that. But I can tell you now, for sure, Ayrton believed that Michael did have traction control. And in my opinion, it's only my opinion, that's one of the reasons he went flat through Tamburello on the first flying lap at Imola, when he knew that the tires were way down on temperature, way down on pressure, and it was going to be very, very dodgy over the bumps. And he knew how difficult the car was going to be with that very low ride height, the car bottoming at the front. But he was so concerned about Michael getting past with a toe going into Tosa and therefore pulling away from him with traction control that he was just absolutely hammered down on the throttle just to make sure Michael never got him. And so in my opinion, in a sort of, quite ethereal way, Ayrton's belief in what Benetton were doing actually was a part of the accident that then happened at Imola. So yeah, terrible thing. Sarosh again. Peter, why was Prost sacked by Ferrari in '91? Please. Was he? I don't think he was he? Let me have a look. Sorry, I've just lost that. I clicked on it because I couldn't read the rest of the question, and now it's disappeared in the usual YouTube chat way. Where are we? Why was Prost sacked by Ferrari in '91? The reports are saying that owing to escalating tensions with the team, I thought that Prost was calm, smart, and not emotional. I don't think he was sacked. I think he decided he'd had enough and left, didn't he? I think that was I think what happened, and it was all because Ferrari were very poorly managed at that point, technically speaking, and they had a big. But there was no fighting between them at all. But there was no room for two of them. They had Steve Nichols and Enrique Scalabroni. Enrique done a very good job, ex-Williams designer. We spoke about him on a live stream very recently, had done a very good job. And Prost, I think, is normal. You know, we've seen it with Lewis against, we've seen it Fernando against Lewis. You see it with, you know, all sorts of things. You see it with Daniel Ricciardo and Max. And in Prost's mind, the only way Mansell could be that quick in a Ferrari would be if he was somehow getting some sort of advantage in working with an ex-Williams engineer. And so Prost then put his foot down and said, I want a McLaren engineer, basically, at Ferrari as well, which is why they hired Steve Nichols. And so you had Steve and Enrique, and there wasn't room for two. And Enrique correctly in 1990 wanted to do a female mold carbon chassis car for 91. Ferrari at that point had always run the male mold John Barnard system, you know, the carbon chassis, but all the lovely bodywork on top. But everyone was going to the female mold, much simpler, more efficient, lighter system. And that was and he was starting to draw that car. And when Steve arrived, he said, well, you know, he had no experience with that car at all, of course, with that type of design. And because all he had ever known was the Barnard car, he said, well, I think there's a bit more life in this car. I think we should keep going with the development of this. And so immediately there was a sort of battle going on. And I guess Prost backed Steve, and Nigel didn't really get involved in any of it. But that was the problem. And nobody at Ferrari made a decision. And they actually, I remember they actually said, oh, well, we'll take, for the Monaco Grand Prix, in 1991, we'll have 4 cars. We'll have 2 Scalabroni cars and 2, which will be female mold, and we'll have 2 Steve Nichols cars, which will be developments of the, you know, the current car, which was absolute at Monaco, absolutely ridiculous. And I suspect it was at that point, you know, then Nigel left, and I think Prost, and it just got worse and worse because obviously it was the whole nonsense was, I mean, Enrique left and they should have done the Enrique car, and because they didn't, the car just went downhill, had 0 development in it left, and Prost just got very annoyed by the whole thing. I think that's what happened. Just poor management at Ferrari. And Castelli was the name of the guy running that whole engineering department. And his experience was sort of Fiat Panda front uprights when they moved him to the racing department. So no surprise. Games and music. Here's a new one. Hi there. Welcome to the evening slot of the live stream. Good evening, Peter. Just a trivial question. Based on last year's Cars drivers, who would you put where to make it a level playing field? For example, Max and Charles at Alpine and Borto. Is that what we call him now? Borto at McLaren as examples. Well, you know, depends. Are you talking about being there for the whole year and therefore having a reasonable opportunity to sort of help sort the car out and get rid of some of the idiosyncrasies in the car? Or are you talking about a one-off race that they swap around in? I mean, if you're talking about the first point, yeah, my feeling is that if you put Max in any, and it's not just Max, I think you'd need to have Max and maybe engineers that understand him, as distinct from the engineers with the team that he's just gone to, because Max, like all racing drivers, has things that in his mind that need to be said and explained, and other things he only needs to say 2 or 3 words, and everybody around him, engineering wise, knows exactly what he means and what he wants and what isn't working. And it's like a sort of shorthand. And some drivers, they have this shorthand, but it doesn't add up to very much because they're talking about how to make the car a bit easier to drive or a bit easier with time management, but not quicker. Whereas in Max's case, you would know that everything he does is going to make the car quicker. because he knows already how he's going to drive that car with that mod. And so if you took that and he's got that sort of unit around him, he would make most cars pretty good within 2 or 3 races. Obviously, if there's a major issue in terms of, I don't know, engine flexing on the mountings, or the floor is not correctly fitted, and there's, you know, all sorts of things that a driver like Max would be impossible for him to do anything about. But assuming that all the cars are reasonably well built and well put together, a guy like Max, purely because he knows how he drives, what he wants, and he doesn't understand how he drives, but he knows how he drives. I think that's the right way to phrase it. No disrespect meant. Because he's got that ability just to say, right, this is what I need to get this car really quick now. If I can get rid of the understeer here, I can be very good there. Yeah, I've got terrible traction as a result, but I'll live with that. Don't worry about that. And he'll pinpoint a couple of things, and he'll be quite quick straight away. Not straight away, within a race or two. Whereas I think you'd take some lesser drivers, and it's not fair to mention them really, I'm not going to keep doing that, but if you put a lesser driver in a Red Bull or a McLaren, they wouldn't necessarily, you know, match the team of the incumbent driver. I think that applies to Lando and Oscar as well. I mean, if you put somebody, I don't know, if you put Liam Lawson in a McLaren, I don't think he'd do as good a job straight away as Lando or Oscar. So, you know, yeah, it's an interesting question. And but it kind of depends on how much time they've got in the car to sort it out, if you see what I mean, and you know, what they want from the car. Zavesh Dugal, hi there. Another, I think, a new name. Hi Peter. Enzo managed to lose both Surtees and Nicky in 66 and 77. Why didn't it work out between them? And is Ferrari the main team where politics is so prevalent? And I knew it would be a 2-part one, because another one where this thing is frozen and I've got to get back to the top to get it right. And normalized. Is that one of the reasons they have just so many championships? I seriously think, so annoying this, it keeps freezing, keep going. See the third part of the question. I seriously think McLaren or Merc will overtake them as the most successful team in the near future. Sorry for the long question. Well, let's go back to Surtees. I mean, a lot of it is was Enzo Ferrari delegating day-to-day race management in his later years to various team managers. In the case of John Surtees, the team manager at the time, Dragoni, was not very pro John. I think he was very pro Ludovico Scarfiotti, and that was it. And John had the big accident at Mosport in 65 in the Can-Am Lola. Very lucky to survive that. He was touch and go for a while, but nonetheless did survive, and survived incredibly well, and came out of the box in 66 pretty much as he was, as good as he'd ever been. And it all came to a head there was an incident in Monza 1,000 kilometers. I can't remember what that was, to do with a windscreen wiper or something, where John wanted it fixed or something happened and they didn't do it, which annoyed him intensely, as it would. Then there was a big discussion about Le Mans and who would be the lead driver at Le Mans at the start, and John wanted to do it and Dragoni wanted Ludovico Scarfiotti, which annoyed John. And then John won the Belgian Grand Prix in the wet brilliantly for Ferrari, and no doubt would have been world champion in that year had he stayed at Ferrari, no doubt about it. But then he just left a week after the Belgian Grand Prix, having won that race. He'd had enough. They weren't giving in on what he wanted to do at Le Mans. He didn't like the management there, and he just left. Some of that was John's personality. Maybe if he'd gone to Enzo Ferrari cap in hand and said, look, I really want to stay with you. I've just won the Belgian Grand Prix. I can't work with this guy anymore. We've got to make changes. Maybe he'd already had that discussion with Enzo. I don't know. But he just left. And it was due to poor delegation, really. And I think in 77 with Nicky, it was... I think that was more Nicky than anything else. It wasn't that he'd had enough of Ferrari. I think he'd just had enough of Formula One. He'd done his He'd won his world championship in 75. He had the big accident in 76. He came back and then he won the 77 world championship. And at that point, Nicky wanted to set up his airline and do different things, you know, intelligent, not much more than in the Audi sense of the word, I think. Intelligent, ambitious, clever, you know, great guy, all round great guy. And I just think he felt he'd outgrown Formula One at that point. And but it was Bernie that then said, no, 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 you need to continue in Formula One, and offered him a very nice deal where he could take Parmalat. He had Parmalat sponsorship, but he could take Sante Ghedini, Nicky's guy, could join Brabham and look after Nicky at Brabham, which was a great thing. And then the next thing he said, right, we'll get Mano Kogi, who was Nicky's #1 mechanic at Ferrari. We'll get him to join Brabham Alpha as well. And all of a sudden, Nicky felt, wow, you know, this could be a whole new start. I'll do that. And in the background, I think he was still thinking about the airline. But he couldn't resist the Brabham thing. And it was classic Nicky that, having won the championship, he goes to the Canadian Grand Prix and decides he's not going to do the Canadian Grand Prix and not going to race again that year. And that's when Gilles Villeneuve, of course, took over. So, and then I think in the back of his mind, Nicky was also always at that point thinking of the airline. He always used to talk about, you know, getting this license and going to Wichita, see the Cessna guys, do this, do that. And the airline was always there bubbling away. And it was always an enticement for him to get out of Formula One. Of course, he then did after the Brabham era. But I think it was more Nicky, really, at Ferrari. The problem at Ferrari really was, not the problem, but Marco Piccinini had arrived as a sort of team manager now, the sort of Dragoni of the 70s. And he was not an easy guy at all, very political. Carlos didn't get on with him very well. I don't think Nicky really cared either way, but it was a difficult time. And Enzo Ferrari was more and more in the background by then. But he really believed in Marco Piccinini, which was, you know, a difficult thing. So yeah, politics at Ferrari, so many different reasons for it. And I suppose it all comes down to, if you said, well, if Enzo was, you know, had been around more, would these things have happened? But I think they probably would, because he was just a racer and he made poor decisions sometimes. That's, you know, he wasn't this perfect team owner, team manager. Even when he was going to races, they had massive dramas with drivers throughout the career, throughout the history of Ferrari. I mean, if you think about the drivers that came and went at Ferrari and the pressure he used to put his drivers under, and I'm just thinking of Luigi Musso, Eugenio Castellotti as good examples, and you know what led to their accidents. Sadly, it was all pressure from Enzo Ferrari, and you know, the days of Luca Montezemolo were over. And I think that was another thing, you know, he'd moved on there up the Fiat ladder. And I think that was another thing from Nicky's point of view. It wasn't quite the same with Luca no longer sort of there at every race. And yeah, that was it. Yeah, good question. Looking back, you know, how did all those things happen? Yeah, it's a good question. Drew C, last week you asked for least deserving winner of Grand Prix. I rate it's Pastor Maldonado. Aston Martin safety medical car contract is over. Well, yeah, that's a good thing, isn't it? That thing lumbering around in the wet. No wonder the tires are losing temperature. But yeah, Pastor Maldonado. I knew somebody would mention Pastor. And in Pastor's defense, I would say, yes, after he won the Spanish Grand Prix, he definitely felt that he had cracked it. And I don't think he used his head as well as he should have post Spain. Good example was, I think it was Valencia, when he had a very good chance to win, and all he had to do was pass Lewis from memory, and Lewis's tires were going off, and they were saying to Pastor, look, you know, don't even try to pass the guy, you're going to get him anyway, because his tires had gone off completely. He's down to the canvas. And of course he couldn't resist it, went inside and had some sort of shunt, and that was it. But putting that to one side, I think, you know, in the build up to that, he was really, really good in Formula 3000, super quick. And then again in that Spanish Grand Prix, you know, He absolutely delivered in a very, very good car, in a car that was perfectly suited to Barcelona, I have to say that. But it was Pastor Maldonado that drove it without any issues and without any mistakes, and beat Fernando Alonso in a Ferrari on home territory. So would Lance Stroll be capable of that? I don't know. I think it's look. I mean, I've thought about other drivers myself, and not many actually jump to mind as the worst ever in Formula One. And maybe we're creating a whole new genre that Lance Stroll's going to be the head of if he does win a Grand Prix in 2026. Because I think it will. I think it will. He will be definitely at the bottom of the list, in my opinion, through his own fault. Because I don't know. What he's just a unique property, isn't he? Because he makes it clear that Formula One isn't really his passion, and I think he said a few times, if he'd been left to him, he would have become a tennis pro or something. And so there's that. And then there's this constant finance that's been thrown in his direction throughout his career, that you've got to become a Grand Prix winner, you've got to be world champion, you have the talent. And has that ever happened before to anybody with that sort of level of talent? I don't think it has. And so, I mean, again, in Maldonado's favor, he had a pretty tough original yes, I mean, he always had a budget out of Venezuela, but it wasn't that easy. And like everybody else, it was a rocky road. And he did do a lot of winning, ultimately, when he got into the feeder formula. And Lance did too, I agree. But I don't know. For me, Lance is good in the wet. He's pretty good in the wet. And if he's got a very good Adrian Newey car and a very good Honda engine, I don't see how he's not going to win Grand Prix. But where does that put him in the overall rankings of Formula One drivers? Chris Amon never won a Grand Prix, but in my mind, that will never, ever put Lance Stroll ahead of Chris Amon. Never, not in a million years. A lot of other drivers as well who never won Grand Prix. This is a question, I'm really not going to go there. It's from user. Hi, Peter. Your thoughts on Trump's plan to invade Greenland? Should the FIA cancel US races as they did with Russia when they attacked Ukraine? I don't really want to go there because I'm not sure this is the vehicle for politics, and I think everybody has their own opinion. Yeah, I mean, you can see that I'm in support of Ukraine. You can see I'm in support of Canada and a lot of other things in the description below this video, but I think that's about as far as I want to say on YouTube. And I think it goes with religion as well. I think politics and religion are things that, well, certainly with religion, I think, or spirituality, whatever you want to call it, I think it's a very personal thing, and we should try to be helpful to one another, and we should look at the ways forward in life to become better human beings. But thrusting a specific type of religion down the throat of anybody, I think, is wrong. And politics too. Politics is just, it's humanity at its top level of, these people have been chosen or have risen to the top of humanity. That's right, the surface of humanity. Top's probably the wrong word. And they're the people making all the decisions and the influence, but they're reflecting all the imperfections of human beings anyway, aren't they? And where we're going. And if you go right back to year one, if we didn't have any countries and borders, would the world be a safer, better, happier place? Anyway, I'm not going to go into that, but anyway, thank you very much for your question. Marina Orlando Rodriguez Huis. Hi, Peter. Hope you're doing well. In a video on YouTube, Mark Hughes from The Race was explaining why Charles was third in their 25 drivers ranking ahead of the McLaren drivers. How he dragged it's 4 questions. Okay, that dog of a Ferrari in places it had absolutely no business being. He said in Monaco he was absolutely mind-blowing through to back, and that apparently when the McLaren drivers looked at... where are we? This is the problem when you guys ask long questions. I have to keep scrolling down and finding where it's frozen. Hope looked at Lando said to Oscar, could you do that? And Oscar said, I think you should try it first. Mark said it was absolutely beyond anyone's imagination. It was impossible to do that. Okay. Well, what was the original question? Let me go back to the top and see if I can find out what we're talking about here. Because in my mind, tobacco isn't a significant, massively significant corner in Monaco anyway, because it's all about entrance to the swimming pool there, and let's say Charles got speed into and out of tobacco based on what the McLarens are doing. Where is that speed coming from? Because as far as I know, McLaren drivers were on and off fifth gear, weren't they, through to back, maybe fourth? Anyway, I'm a bit confused by that because I've never really seen tobacco as a significant corner when it comes to a lap of Monaco. I see the entrance to the pool being a significant corner, and definitely the entrance to Rascasse, obviously Casino Square. Tobacco, interesting, yeah. Anyway, let's go back to the question you were asking, which is, what do I think about Mark Hughes rating him fourth? Was it third? Third. So who was second then? My reaction to that is, why only third? For Charles Leclerc, I would have put him second. I would have had Max first, Charles Leclerc second for sure in 2025 ratings, if anybody asked me. So not having seen that, I've no idea who they had in second place. George Russell, I guess. But I think Charles did a better job than George over the year, particularly as he says in a pretty bad car. I mean, I'm going to try not to call bad cars a dog of a car anymore, because being Dexter's dad, I've got massive respect for the way Dexter, his change of direction, his ability to have locked up rears but still keep the car perfectly under control. I say the car, his fuselage. You see where I'm coming from. I think it's wrong to call him a dog of a car. A dog of a car for me is a really good car these days. Anyway, that's beside the point. I would have had Charles second in 2025. So I don't know. Why did they only rate him third is the question. One Blacks. Hi, Peter. Hope you're well. This is one of the best shows on TV I watch every week. Well, thank you very much. Interesting that you say TV. I was listening to a survey the other day. Was it survey? A poll? No, survey, I guess. And it was that actually more people are watching YouTube on TV now than they were 5 years ago, when everybody said, oh, the day of TV screens is over. And although a lot of people still watch the shows on mobile phones, a lot of watching it on TV. Interesting, isn't it? And thank you very much anyway for that. Very kind comment. Anyway, in just going back to it, thinking about it, I will pay more attention to tobacco in future. I'm amazed that it was that dramatic a corner for them. This year, Monaco Grand Prix, we'll watch with great interest. And why do I say that? I'm just thinking why I say that, because, I've worked very closely with Nigel Mansell and Carlos Reutemann, and I've done many laps of Monaco with them in their head, driving road cars around wherever, or walking the circuit, or even just talking about the lap over dinner. And neither of those two anyway, have ever said, oh yeah, tobacco, I've got it absolutely right today, or, I've got to work on tobacco. They all just say, yeah, tobacco, it's not really, it's just like a left-hander set. The whole thing is just a setup for the swimming pool, and making sure you're coming out with exactly the right attitude on the car, and you've got exactly the right feel for the turn into the left. Mind you, the left entry to the swimming pool is not as dramatic now as it was in the days of, say, Carlos and Nigel, when it was just a brick wall on the left, a concrete wall, and now it's curb and everything. But even so, it's still very, very quick. Anyway, I need to look at that. I need to look at the telemetry of what Charles was doing through tobacco. I don't know. Anyway, the final question from you is, what is that he's doing? Is it short corners? Sorry if this is a long question. Well, no, it's not short corners. It's because he has the ability to create short corners, which you see graphically at Monaco with Charles in the Rascasse section. Because he has that touch and feel, he's dancing with the Ferrari through tobacco. And he's got incredible suppleness and reaction and balance on what the car is doing. Maybe, if I think about it, maybe that's what the two McLaren drivers were saying to one another. They were saying, if you were in a Ferrari, would you be able to do that? It was probably that. I would guess, because the Ferrari through there for sure was very tippy toe, whereas a McLaren through there was just easy. He says glibly, but you know what I'm saying. To me, Tabac's not a corner where you could. I've never been able to look at a driver through Tabac and say, "Wow," but all credit to Mark if he can and did. Drew, to Lewis and Alonso, you guys have combined. We want to see Fornaroli and Felipe. What more do you guys want from us? I got your 15 years of merch. Thanks. It's time to retire. It's basically telling Lewis and Alonso to retire. Really? Well, I don't know why everybody's got this thing about Fernando. Why do they want Fernando to retire when he's just finally got an Adrian Newey car with Honda engines? Why do they want him to retire? Super chat here. I don't. I'm looking forward to seeing Fernando in a really good car. And we know how, I mean, he's quick. Sebastian Vettel didn't look anything like as good alongside Lance Stroll as Fernando's looked. And does that speak to Fernando's talent still? Probably not. Lance has probably gone off the boil a bit. But Fernando Alonso, I would have said, is just as quick now as he's ever been. Maybe not quite as aggressive in traffic, but very, very good. Very quick. Hi, Mr. Windsor. Can you test the super chat from Paolo Souza? Can you tell us a bit about Christian Fittipaldi? Why is that not coming up? Does it come up now? Yeah. Nice guy. Good bloke. He's Wilson's son, I think, wasn't he? Isn't he? Yeah, I can't really say very much. I think he was about as good as Wilson. And I'm not saying that in a disparaging way. Wilson was actually much better than I think a lot of people realized. And I always got on really well with Wilson and really rated him, Wilson Fittipaldi, that is. And not really rated him, but I thought he was good and he was getting better. And he was a difficult thing, I suppose, having Emerson as your younger brother, but he was very good, very professional. I mean, he drove for Bernie, which was always a difficult thing if you weren't super quick delivering and keeping your mouth shut, which is what Bernie expected his racing drivers to do. And Wilson wasn't like that. He had a very effervescent personality. He and Susie were great, good friends, actually, and used to hang out a bit. And Christian, yeah, about the same. I never really thought any more about Christian. I can't really add any more to that. Sorry, I've got to be honest. I can't really say, he was mega quick. I don't think he was. I think he was Christian level. Sorry, Wilson level. Marino Rodriguez, same person. Sorry if I reposted my question, Peter. I uploaded it yesterday and today it was no longer there. Maybe it's further up in the chat and I can't see it, but thank you so much for your insight. Okay, next one, Jez James. Hi, Peter. Did you go to Senna's funeral? If so, any thoughts, emotions? Jackie Stewart said it wasn't until he met Senna's mum at the funeral that he broke down. Where are we? You said on your last live stream that you liked or respected the Jesus Saves logo on Alex Ribero's car, so I just wondered if you have a faith. It's not too personal to share your beliefs. Jackie also said that God has given us a gift to drive these cars. It's what we've done, and that gift can reveal the talent. I didn't go to the funeral, no. What was I doing? I don't know. Something happened. I wasn't going to races regularly at that point in '94. I was in America. Yeah, I was in America doing something with Mo Nunn and a few others, Firestone, and yeah, I didn't go to the funeral. Well, you're asking about my faith now. I'd rather not go into that. It's quite a personal thing, but suffice to say, I do believe in God. So, if that's what you're asking. And interestingly enough, Jackie, I've never spoken to Jackie about his belief either, but I know Jackie. I think I know Sir Jackie pretty well. I spent a lot of time with him, and I get he definitely is a very spiritual man, and he definitely has a wonderful feel for life and for an ongoing life. So, yeah. Anyway, thanks for that. You may think, oh, Peter's not answering the question, but I just don't really want to use this platform for that. Although I will say this, I couldn't remember the name of the Bible that Alex Ribeiro said I had to get. It was called the Good News Bible. and it had just come out, and it was the first ever English language Bible written in modern English. And I remember Alex was very, very fired up about it. And this is from Zavesh Dugal. Peter, this might be a little bit out of topic, but should you limit how many questions one can ask? Otherwise, we miss some very interesting questions. Maybe 2 questions per person's enough. Yeah, I think you're right. And I'm going to try to do that as we go into this year. And it's kind of difficult because although you can see all the questions, and I probably can if I use a different thing here, in reality, I'm using a little box here which only has 3 questions in it, and I have to keep scrolling down, and that's how I'm able to get them up on screen, by using a plugin which is doing that. But it doesn't give me a great view of the number of questions there are. Anyway, Drew agrees with that, and I will do my best. And we talk about that all the time, actually. This is another super chat from Perpetual Bias. Yeah, another name I'm familiar with. Good evening, Peter. Nice Speed TV jacket. Can you talk about what teams like Renault, Sauber have been doing for a decade plus and still be back markers? Well, you know, as Morris Nunn used to say, my old mate Morris Nunn, who I was just talking about, it's not complicated. It's not complicated. It's just about good people getting on with the job and not worrying too much about the emotions and the keeping things clear, and not worrying about how intelligent they are or not. Just getting on with motor racing. It's a race team. Get on with it. That would be my thing. And just good people. It's all about good people. And if they haven't had good results, it's purely because they've got the wrong people who think the wrong way, and they don't have somebody who's pushing them to think in a path that works for the team as a whole. I mean, if you work for Adrian Newey or Patrick Head at his peak, or John Barnard at his peak, or any of these great designers, even Mauro Foggieri would be another good one, Colin Chapman, obviously. It wasn't just that they had the ability with a pencil to draw a line where nobody else could, or in a shape that nobody else could, or even think about a concept in the bath when nobody else was thinking about concepts in the bath. It was also because they were able to see other people around them with talents that could supplement their own, providing they were channeled in the right direction. And that's how you put a race team together. You've got to have a feel for the river. The river has to be flowing in the right direction, and then you have to get the right people to be a part of that flow. And that's how the race team happens. And if you take a guy like Neil Oatley, who's still at McLaren now, but he was one of the designers under Patrick Head. Absolutely for sure, Neil would have been a different designer had he never worked under Patrick Head. Probably Paddy Lowe, the same thing. And the same would be anyone who's worked for Adrian Newey. You know, if Rob Marshall's as good as he is now at McLaren, some of that will be because of the time he spent with Adrian Newey. And these teams that are at the back of the grid don't have people who are either creating the flow of the river in the way that a Newey does or a Patrick Head did, or they've got people who are creating rivers that are going in completely the wrong direction and only working 50% of the time. The rest of the time they're just flowing down into into a tributary. And it's that ability to see the direction in which you have to go. And it kind of started in the case of Williams. It started with Frank Williams realizing that Patrick Head was the guy to create this river flow for him. And it was the first time in his life he'd done that. He'd worked with other designers, John Clark. You know, he'd finished second in the 75 German Grand Prix in a John Clark designed Williams Formula One car. But guess what? Today, Williams don't even want to acknowledge that. They think that Williams began in 1977. In 75, a Williams finished second in the German Grand Prix, just expunged from heritage. And that's very wrong, I think. And it wasn't as if it was a car bought off the shelf. It was a proper Williams Formula One car. But when Frank met Patrick Head, he could feel, he had a sense of Patrick Head being an engineering force that he was prepared to trust 100%. And because he did trust it 100%, a little bit like Christian Horner with Adrian Newey at Red Bull, he just went for it 100% and gave Patrick everything he could possibly give to an engineer to design and build a racing car. That's what it takes. And that's why I'm a bit confused by all this Audi stuff about clear, technical, intelligent, emotional. You know, all these words, why don't they just get on with it? That's what I would say. That's what Colin Chapman would say. I know if he was still with us. Um, on a forum, this is from PolEd111. On a forum, it said that Rob Wilson tested Lauda's McLaren back in the day with a view to a drive. Do you know if this is true? The only Formula One team that I'm aware Rob was close to driving for was Tyrrell, and he got gazumped by Michele Alboreto, who had a bit of money, and Rob didn't. But Ken was very keen to run Rob in that year, and I don't remember. I'll have to ask him. I don't recall him driving a McLaren F1 car. He's still, very good. And just talking of Rob, he's still doing a lot of stuff. And I thought it was quite interesting that to see that Kimi Antonelli and Lance Stroll, to give him his credit, have been or about to go out in Formula 3 cars, proper Formula 3 cars, not FIA ones, Dallaras and stuff, nice ones, Euro Formula ones. I think at Pembrey, somewhere like that, just to sort of get into just to warm up again before the Barcelona test. And that was good to see. I know a lot of drivers have been doing stuff like that, but it's good to see Antonelli and Stroll doing that. Another one from Jez James. Courage. Could it be that if a driver tips over to having courage, then they could be introducing fear and therefore could negatively affect their concentration? Buzz Aldrin once said he has no fear. Well, not until or unless something goes dramatically wrong. The Apollo 13 crew certainly seemed to remain somewhat calm to get them home. Yeah, I mean, that's right. I mean, I only go on about courage because Sterling Moss summed it up so well, which was that if you have to be brave to get in a racing car, you shouldn't be getting in the car. It's all about anticipation and feel. And motorsport's much too dangerous to start driving on reflexes and hoping you don't have an accident and being scared in case you do have one. If you're not in control of yourself and what the car is doing and anticipating what it's doing, don't even think about being a racing driver. But there are grey areas. James Hunt used to say he was incredibly nervous before a race, but it all went away the minute he put the visor down, and then he just felt a part of the car, and he no longer felt fear or bravery no longer entered into it. It was just being a part of the car and doing a systematic, athletic job, in James's vernacular. And so there's that before the race, yeah, obviously there's tension, but that's a sort of athletic, healthy tension that takes you to a peak where you can perform. A peak at which Jackie Stewart says it was always very important to take all the emotion out of it. Let's have a look at that Audi thing again. Emotional, they say. Jackie Stewart wouldn't agree with that. The one thing you don't want is emotion. You get it all out and you're like a deflating balloon. Of course, they're talking about the race team. They're talking about designers. They've got to be emotional about what they're doing. But do they really? I think it even penetrates further than the race car and the race driver. I think a race team actually should be very clinical and not be very emotional. And I say that partly because I did work for Frank Williams for a long time, and I've lost count of the number of times we've won a Grand Prix, and then on the Monday morning we'd be back at the factory, or Tuesday morning if it was a flyaway, and Frank he'd be po-faced, and he wouldn't be in any way relaxed. He would be pounding up and down the race shop or the corridors, talking to people, full of energy, only talking about the next race, no reflection at all on the success, and no moment really of enjoying the success, just moving on to the next one in a very unemotional way. So that's how I kind of worked my Formula One career when I was working for the teams as well. Had to be very, very unemotional, because it's too easy to let it all get away from you. As you say, Apollo 13, if they'd been emotional, and emotion can lead to panic. It can lead to things going on in your brain that are not in your control. And that's what you do not need as a racing driver. This is Frosty. Good name, from Ontario, Canada. Hi, Peter. Love your insight into everything racing, and it's awesome. I can watch you live for once. Ha ha. Well, yeah, thank you very much. Nice to know that you're in Canada too, one of my favorite countries. And wish that country well. And what a great Prime Minister you have now, Mark Carney. Great guy. I really rated him when he was head of the Bank of England as well. Did an excellent job there. Grant Joseph, Hi, Peter. Hope you're well. What do you make of Honda blurring images of parts of the engine at the launch yesterday? Are they likely to have found something others haven't beyond compression ratios? No, I think it's just, playing a bit of a game, isn't it? That's what you do. Uh, Unfortunate and not, I think, to be condoned because, as I said many times, Formula One likes to sell itself to the public at large and to its benefactors, to the stakeholders, as the pinnacle of automotive and racing technology. And yet we do our utmost to hide this technology and never talk about it. And that's a paradox, is it not? And my view is that the technology should be open right up to the point where it's about the people who create the technology. And we know those people and the backgrounds they have and the pressures they're under and how they're going about their job. And I've always said that is a great TV reality show that's easily producible by a producer that knows his stuff and isn't going to give away any of the key secrets of any of the teams or PU manufacturers. But because everybody's so paranoid and everything ultimately comes down to the lowest common denominator, the response really to all the teams, from all the teams, is, oh, the less anybody knows about the technology, the better. It's all secret. If the car stops, we'll just say it was a technical problem. We might not even say that. We just say it stopped. And at the launch we'll cover everything up, we'll put blurs everywhere. Yeah, it's pathetic in my view. We should be talking about it. All the public would want to know what the challenges are really of building these 26 Formula One engines. They don't really know. They can sort of hear the odd quote from the odd engineer and he's not going to give much away, and it's wrong. I think it's really sad that Formula One is missing this opportunity, particularly now with this new formula and how different it is aerodynamically for the car and certainly for the power unit. And it's worse than all of that, because one of the reasons Formula One is going to 50% electrification is because that is the way the world is going. And it wants to be seen to be in step with the rest of the world. And yet we're not talking about that either. We're just saying it's happening. We're not really understanding how it's happening. And we don't understand the development that's going on with batteries, for example, because they're worried that if they give away a secret, one of their opposition might get an advantage. I mean, it's just ridiculous. As I say, all of that is perfectly manageable by a proper TV producer and a committee at F1 to control what information remains private and what doesn't. But we should have much more information than we do. Much more. You could easily get, I reckon you could get to 2/3 of all the technology and fully understanding and explaining it without giving away any secrets at all. As it is, we're probably giving away 1%, less than that. David, VZ5HG. Peter, what criteria would you use to advise a driver to retire from Formula One if you were the driver's manager? Well, I've always said it's peripheral vision first. And if I was managing a driver, I would always be, and he was over, say, I don't know, 27, I would always be, I'd be getting to do a proper eye test 3 times a year, and I'd be focusing, excuse the pun, 100% on peripheral vision. No, 90% on peripheral vision, just to make sure that it's as good as it's ever been. And if there's any deterioration of peripheral vision, I would counsel him to retire straight away. I mean, that you can wear contact lenses to correct peripheral vision. Obviously, spectacles would not correct it, and that's something that can be looked at. But I don't know many drivers that successfully have used contact lenses. I don't know why that is, because the lenses today are so thin. It's just like cling film. It's very, very thin, and it doesn't impede your eye. You don't feel it on your eyes at all. But maybe it's speed. I don't know. Maybe there's an issue. But I would always say peripheral vision. Beyond that, I don't think there's a real issue with general physical fitness, all that stuff. I mean, if they constant pounding, chronic back pain could lead to something a bit more serious in later life, that's when you might want to think about that as well. And it'd be interesting to see what these cars are like in terms of their ride over bumps and stuff, whether they're any better. I hope they are. So, yeah. Next one, Jacob. backing. Wow, I'm excited after hearing the Red Bull Ford engine sound. Yeah, and all credit to Phil Prue there. I remember chatting to him last year, and he's head of Red Bull Powertrain Ford, and he was saying, they're all a bit concerned about what they're going to sound like, and lo and behold, it sounds great. It's interesting. Even last year, there's a big difference, wasn't there, between say the Red Bull engine Honda and the Mercedes from the onboards. Massive difference in engine note, and I always thought the Red Bull sounded more gravelly, a better sound actually, more just more granular. And I'm pleased that the current one sounds good as well. I agree with you, and I don't think we should be too worried about the sound of the current engines. I'm trying to be positive here. I don't think we should be. Let's have a look. Another super chat from Paulo Souza again. I've always felt that Felipe Nasr and Pascal Wehrlein never got a fair shot in Formula One. Hope all is well. Yeah, totally agree. Felipe Nasr, very much quicker than he's ever given credit for. Very talented driver, and great shame. He just got never given a chance really when he lost that. Was it Sauber? I guess he was at, wasn't he? And I always rated him. Became good friends with Felipe, actually. Nice guy, and I'm glad he's had a good second career in America. And what he's doing there, he's doing well. Pascal Wehrlein, totally agree as well. There's a guy who, he came in and he was just really quick straight away. I had a lot of time for Pascal Wehrlein, but just like so many of these drivers, you fall into having proved how quick he was, he then fell into sort of third driver at Mercedes. And of course, that was the end of it all. And, how many drivers have gone into this third driver role, and then you never hear anything from them again. It's such a sad thing. And it just brings me back to my old chestnut of we need a B division Formula One World Championship below this one, between Formula 2 and Formula One. And it should be for all the young guys on the verge of Formula One, running last year's Formula One cars or 2 or 3 year older at circuits that want to be on the Formula One calendar but aren't at the moment, in countries that Formula One is trying to encourage in the future, like South Africa, South America, India, China, Vietnam, so forth. And that championship should exist. But because everybody's so greedy to look after their own championship and wants everything for themselves, nobody can ever think laterally like that and make it happen. But that a good example would be Pascal Wehrlein would have done well in that. Instead of which we haven't really heard of him again. I know he's done other stuff and it's been good for him, but ultimately he deserved a proper Formula One seat. I think I really rated him very highly. I think he was better than Christian Klein, let's put it that way, and Christian Klein had a lot more chances than Pascal Wehrlein. The Formula One sound is certainly better and back, says Jacob. That's good. So there we are. Racer says, looks like Merc will have the best engine. Really? Say that already? That's good. I'm amazed you can say that before they've even turned a wheel. But anyway, good on you. So this is very tiresome, having constantly freezing. I don't know why that is. Probably because we've got so many questions. But thank you for all those who are putting in questions. This is JPS78 as a good name. MA Mario Andretti. Hi, Peter. I wonder what your thoughts are on the impact of private equity firms buying minority stakes in Formula One teams. My concern is private equity firms have only one goal: to make money. Well, I don't understand it really, because I've got a fairly simplistic brain, and so far as I know, there is absolutely no point at all in buying a minority stake in a private company. Why would you do that? Because it's only worth what somebody will pay you for it. It has no value beyond that. But like you, I agree with you. If you look at Doralton and Williams, as I was saying last week, to me, that's a pretty faceless operation. And I keep having this sort of fear that the only reason Doralton are in it really is to make money and sell that franchise at some point at some vast profit, which is terrible, I think. Racing is about, what is it? It's about emotion. It's about passion as well. And yeah, I think I'm not a fan of commercial rights at all. And I know that's not the same thing, but that's why I was praising this new Formula 3 championship, Euro Cup 3, I think it's called, which is owned by the teams. I wish Formula 1 was, actually. And I think it's, whenever money becomes a priority, usually it all ends badly. It ends in fighting, or the quality goes down, generally speaking. And I think, that's what I think about it. And if I was running a private equity firm, and there's more likelihood of that than an Ashes Test match lasting 5 days in Australia, then I would never ever buy a private. I'd never buy a minority stake in a private company. I just don't get it. Anyway, Racer's coming up with his prediction for the year: 1 Mercedes, 2 Ford, 3 Honda, 4 Ferrari, 5 Audi. Yeah, well, I think pretty safe with Audi being last for the reasons we've been talking about a bit earlier. Let's have a look at that. Everybody's saying Merc, just assuming Merc will be good, and they probably will be very good. But it's interesting now, Ford have crept into everybody's peripheral vision now, haven't they? Or field of perception is probably a better because they weren't before. Nobody was thinking, oh, Ford going to be terrible. You know, what are Red Bull doing? Now look at that. People predicting they might have the second best engine, ahead of Ferrari and Honda. I think Honda will be really good. I don't understand why anybody thinks Honda wouldn't be good. I don't understand that at all. I think Honda will be very good. But I think also, remember, the FIA are going to want parity anyway. So it's going to be one Merc, two equal one Ford, equal one Honda, equal one Ferrari, and probably P2 Audi, or P6, whatever it'll be, 5. And I think it'll be much closer than, it should be much closer than I think, given all the stuff they're going to do with parity. Okay, 1 second. Just got to get a WhatsApp cleared here from my son. Where are we? Sorry, excuse me while I do this. Oh, okay. It's just to say, because Jack's out at the moment, so I say Dexter's already had his dinner. Okay, very important. I'm glad we got on top of that. Okay, all right. So JPS again. I attended an 82 Canadian Grand Prix. I had a general admission ticket, didn't see the start. When I got home, did I read Riccardo Paletti was killed at the start? Did you attend this race? Yeah. And I saw that accident. I was on top of the old top of the old control tower, and the start was at the little bit of straight after the hairpin in those days. And yeah, I mean, that was actually, speaking of Lance Stroll supposedly wanting to be a tennis player, Riccardo Paletti didn't really want to be a Formula One driver, as far as I know, and he was sort of pushed into it by his parents, and he was never really comfortable. He didn't look like a Grand Prix driver. He never looked relaxed, in my opinion. Yeah, it was just one of those terrible things. I mean, running into the back of a stationary car, and it was systematic of the times. I mean, those things happened. And when they happened, you thought, well, how could that happen? The organization, the way the marshalling was, the way we organize starts has to change. But nobody had a vision of how it could be. Nobody then was thinking about how a start is today in 2025, 2026. All we could think of was, well, maybe we need more marshals waving flags or something, or this or that. And it was just, you know, and I'm only saying that because I'm sitting here now saying, yes, I saw that fatality happen right in front of me. And you may think, how could that have happened in Formula One? And I'm just trying to think how we didn't then prevent it happening again, because similar things did continue to happen, not necessarily at starts, but in other ways. And I don't know. It's just human nature, isn't it? You just get on with the next race. And I think the reality is we just kind of never had enough time. I say we, I'm talking about Formula One collectively back then. We never really had enough time to sit down and think about how things could change. It was always the next race and how to make it bigger and better and more money and bigger fields and this and that and new circuits and prize money. It was so sad. It was very sad, and it was a terrible thing. And yeah, sort of thing you never forget. When I was there, sadly saw far too many accidents in those days. So another one. This is from Trish Alamandras. Trisha Lamadras. think I got it right, Tricia. Apologies. Hello, Mr. Windsor. Peter, please, how have you been? I have a genuine feeling that we will see Williams uprising this season, considering how James Vowles said that they were more focused on 26 than 25. Yeah, no doubt they will do well. They'll probably win a Grand Prix, I would think. Nice to see Carlos Sainz win a Grand Prix again. I hope he does. Or Alex Albon. He deserves to win a race, I think. And I think Williams will continue to get better. Why wouldn't they? You know, if they're not, what are they doing? Of course they should. And but there will be a little bit more competition, I think, midfield from Alpine, who've got the Merc engine now as well. Pierre Gasly isn't going to go away quietly, I don't think. And I think there's the midfield, to be fair. I mean, it's a funny year, I think, ahead of us. I think there are going to be some races where there will be probably a lot of retirements, and somebody like a Carlos in a Williams is going to win it, or maybe a Gasly in an Alpine. You're going to have a few one-off wins like that, I think. That's what it feels like. I just can't imagine all these new power units are going to be, you know, absolutely, totally reliable from race one. But some will get it right and some won't. But yeah, as in a general thing, of course, Williams should continue to improve every year. Why wouldn't they? And any good self-respecting team principal would be saying that. So yeah, I think you're right. And actually, the same person. What do you think about Williams this season? Just answering that question again. So yeah, that's what I think. I think they probably will win a race. Doesn't change my view that I think Carlos Sainz should have gone to Audi. I think long term, be a much better team for him. But anyway, there he is at Williams, and I hope he wins a race. He's a good guy. Yeah, Central 99. Thoughts on Ugo currently dominating in Oceania in the Toyota Series? Yeah, a lot of time for Ugo. Very good. He's just been dropped by McLaren, hasn't he? And I suspect, I'm only putting two and two together and getting five. It's not because they don't rate him. I think he's 6'6", I think, isn't he? And I think it's kind of, you know, I think obviously they want to have cockpits that suit all different human frames. But I think that's one of the things you have to think about with Ugo. Not only is he dominated Oceania, but he was quickest in the Super Formula tests as well at Suzuka before that. I mean, the guy is very talented, very good. But well, no buts really. I think he's a great guy, great passion, and I'd love to see him succeed at the highest level. He would be the tallest driver ever in Formula One if he makes it to Formula One, which I think he will. I think he's very good, and it's great to have him in Formula One. It sounds like a patronising thing to say, but it's great to have him on the road to Formula One because he's got very, you know, interesting background, New Yorker, but exotic parentage as well, and cool guy. Yeah, I'd love to see him do very, very well. JBE36. Peter, your thoughts on the old Hockenheim circuit? Have you ever driven it? Yeah, I've driven a lap or two around there. Not very quickly. Just on a Thursday when you could drive around in the old days, the German Grand Prix. You get in your car. If you had a photographer's armband or whatever, you could do a few laps. Yeah, never a fan actually. Partly because it's where we lost Jimmy, and so Hockenheim's always had that feeling to it. Whenever I hear the word Hockenheim, I always think of Jimmy. But I also think of Patrick Depailler as well. And that was one of the years I did drive around it, actually, was to see what had happened there. And that was the long Us curve at the back, long, fast right-hander. And Patrick had a tyre failure, went off and hit the guardrail and was killed in the Alpha. And all the catch fencing that would have slowed the car down and hopefully would have prevented the fatality was still all rolled up by the side of the track, ready to be installed for the Grand Prix. This was the test before the race weekend. Of course, by the time we got down there was, lots of catch fencing, but all too late. And then, of course, I was there when Pironi had that big accident in '82 in the wet. So for me, Hockenheim is all about accidents. I haven't got a lot of great memories of Hockenheim. The drivers I've worked with never really liked it. They always thought it was quite boring and usually got stuck behind cars with more powerful engines. But I will say this, it was an instrumental circuit in the career of Nigel Mansell because it was at Hockenheim that he was given a second chance by Ron Toranak in the Ralt Honda Formula 2 team when Honda were developing that beautiful V6 2-litre engine. And Nigel had driven 5 races with them, I think, at the beginning of the year when they were still developing the chassis and the engine, mainly the engine. And it had a 5th at Zandvoort, after which Ron Toranak thought, well, the car's pretty good now. I'll get rid of Mansell and put somebody quick in the car. So he hired Tom Gloy, a former Atlantic driver who'd been doing well in Ralts, admittedly, but came over and sunk without trace. Then he hired Jeff Lees, who went very well, quick driver, obviously. And then for Hockenheim, that last race in 1980, he decided to run 2 cars for Jeff Lees and Nigel Mansell. And he rang Nigel and said, I was there. He said, we've got 2 cars, Nigel. One's a good chassis with a bad engine, and the other's a good chassis with a good engine, but I'm not going to put them both together, so you can have one or the other. What do you want, the good chassis or the good engine? So Nigel said, I'll go for the good chassis, thinking I'll just take all the wing off the car, which is what he did, and he finished second to Teo Fabi in the Formula 2 race at Hockenheim. And that was, I think, made a big impression on a lot of people, Ron Toranak included. So yeah, Hockenheim was good for that. I just think of Rubens and his win there as well. What a place for him. You know, he had a lot of history at Hockenheim, won a lot of Vauxhall Lotus races, and then to win his Grand Prix there, first Grand Prix, was great. But generally, I'm not a fan of Hockenheim. J.D. Cutright. Hi, Peter. A huge thank you for your fantastic insights, stories, and interviews. Well, it's very kind of you to say so. Thank you. I love that you keep evolving the show and bringing in people like Mark. His detailed knowledge is mind-blowing. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, Mark, I'm very lucky to know Mark and have known him for a long time. Very intelligent guy, lovely, down-to-earth, unemotional approach to racing. Audi, take note. And yeah, I think will give us lots of great insight in this year of strategy and push to pass and active arrow. Mark will be brilliant. And we'll be doing some live streams with Mark, obviously along those lines, so you can ask questions of him as well. Plus Scarbs, who will be more focused on the aero of the car, what they're doing with the design of the car. And hopefully we'll get somebody in on the powertrain PU side as well. So we'll have lots of experts and we'll have live questions and answers, but more of that in a week or two. Mac 790. Peter, do you agree with M. Hughes that those who criticize Schumacher's driving should not give Senna a pass like many do? He believes Senna was far more dangerous with some of his antics. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I think we've talked about this quite a lot, and I do agree with Mark if he said that. And indeed, when asked about some of his antics, Michael said, well, you know, I saw quite a lot of what Ayrton was up to. But, you know, as it was at Corey was saying, but when Ayrton did it, everybody loved it. When Michael did it, they all hated it. And why was that? Because Ayrton was racing against Prost when he was doing most of that. To some extent, Nigel, I suppose, 91, 92. Yeah, okay. I was going to say it's because the British press were very pro-Damon and Michael became the sort of demon man. But having said that, Nigel was pretty much the darling of the British press by that point, and he had a lot of run-ins with Ayrton as well. But he also had run-ins with Nelson and to some extent with Alan Prost in 1990. So it was slightly less one-on-one. I think in the Michael era, it was like all the British press and everybody was pro-Damon and everybody not British was pro-Michael, and it was a big thing. And I suppose all Michael's antics got more publicity or more exposure as a result. But yeah, you know, Senna was definitely dodgy. I mean, talk to Martin Brundle, and as I did many times in Formula 3 when Ayrton used to brake test him, and you know, Nigel was brake tested by Ayrton as well. And yeah, some very dodgy things going on there. Good evening, nice set. Thank you very much. Yeah, playing around with things, but good evening from Trish. Thank you. Chris says it's great to catch me live. Well, thank you very much. Well, you know, I've said before, and I'm not, it's difficult to say this in ways that don't sound like platitudes, but the reality is I'm very fortunate that I can do a show based on you good people. asking me great questions, because most people need, in order to keep doing any sort of YouTube show like this with comment and so forth, need to have somebody else to talk to all the time. But I've got you guys. So when all my mates are not available, which is most of the time, I can talk to you. And it's a very unusual show, I think, in that respect. And all I can say is thank you very much, everybody that gets involved. And it breaks my heart when I have to say, as I might have to fairly soon, that wow, how long have we been going? 8:30. When did we start? 7. Yeah, another half hour. You know, won't get through all the questions, but I'm going to rush through them now, best I can. So that's Christopher. Good to catch you live. Good afternoon. Kane's Cat's Heat. Peter, good afternoon from the 305. Have you been watching the UAE and Australian feeder series? Freca and Formula 4. I've been watching the New Zealand one at the moment. Haven't been watching UAE or Australia. Should do. So much going on. How do I fit all that in with watching the the Australian Open tennis, all the cricket that's been happening? The Big Bash is about to end in Australia, and then of course all the golf that's starting, and the Toyota Series in New Zealand, and the Monte Carlo Rally, and the testing for the Monte Carlo Rally. It's all too much. My brain's exploding. Too much going on from everywhere. Jimmy John, good afternoon. Peter from North Carolina. Thanks for streaming at this time. Well, thank you very much. I mean, I will do more from the evening. I mean, it's great, isn't it, to be able to get to these different parts of the world. Now, what's happened here? Yeah, we'll get through. Try and get through. Noon stream for me in Kansas, says Bo Sinclair. Well, good to know. Thank you very much. Hi to you. Trish, yeah, we've talked about that one. I want to get different questions now. What do you think about Arvid's second lap crash? Might be in Formula One too early. Well, don't know really. I mean, I was hoping nobody would ask me about Arvid because I don't know how he drives. I know a lot of people got quite excited about a lap he did on soft tires in Mexico, but you know, he's in a Red Bull on soft tires. He should be quick, shouldn't he? So I don't know really, and we'll have to wait and see. I suppose one of the reasons, two things. I haven't actually seen how he drives, so I can't say whether he's got that lovely Isaac Hadjar feel for corner entries and the way he's balancing the car up to the rotation point, which Isaac definitely has and was definitely clear in Formula 2. I haven't seen enough, for some reason, I don't know why, of Arvid, and I don't know how he drives. I don't know whether he drives like Alex Albon or Carlos Sainz or George Russell or even Arvid, or even Isaac. I've no idea. So I need to see that. And then beyond that, we don't know really, do we, about the standard of driving in all these categories. I've made this point last week in the live stream that there are so many categories of racing, and in Formula 3 and Formula 2 there are so many drivers that are there basically because they've got money to take to the team that it's very difficult to know what the actual benchmark is. And that's another issue. The teams think they know, but believe me, the teams are driven by a lot more than just watching how a driver performs on a results sheet. None of them actually go out and watch on the circuit, and a lot of their judgment is based on how the driver looks, what his handshake's like, how fit he is, how much money he's got, how he talks to the media, how he doesn't talk to the media, how he performs in a sim, all that stuff that to me is really not really important. And very few decisions about drivers are actually made on proper reality. By which I mean Bruntingthorpe, Snetterton, Goodwood in the wet, with somebody like, not necessarily Rob, but somebody like Rob Wilson, who's looking at the way the initial steering input and looking at the way the brake pedal pressure is changing, that sort of detail. And nobody's doing that, and as far as I can see, with any of the Formula One teams in their academies. And I doubt it's happening even now with somebody like Arvid. They're just assuming he's quick and get on with it. So yeah. Back to scrolling to the top again. Why don't I scroll to the bottom for a change? Most recent question is, okay, there's a lot of chat going on between everybody. Won't go there. This is at Jim Clark. I started working in Formula One a little after Senna. In my time, I have to say Schumacher truly wrung the neck out of whatever we made. Who's your pick in your career? If you're talking to me, Jim Clark, I would say Jim Clark. mind you, it wasn't really my career when I saw Jim Clark drive, and I was still a kid, obviously, when I saw him drive and actually spoke to him and had a chat to him. But he still is as good a driver as I've ever seen in a racing car, particularly around Tabac. Although, of course, Tabac is where he did have a shunt in '67. I think it was Tabac. Mind you, something broke on the Lotus 33, so no surprise there. Mark Hughes, please advise. Okay, there's a lot of chat going on there. So I'll go back to where we'd got to. I think it's probably this. Let's have a look. Is Rory Byrne still involved in Ferrari? Super chat from Kevin Kvora. Thank you very much, Kevin. I think he is. Funnily enough, I came across his name the other day, and it said he's still on a consultancy deal with Ferrari. So if that's the case, and I hope he is. And last time I spoke to Rory, he was fitting well in Thailand, and it is a clean sheet of paper aero, kind of. Ferrari could have quite a good car aerodynamically if Rory's had quite a role in it. But if he's done everything from Thailand, I suppose it's all right. You know, have the old CFD set up there, probably. Luke the Truth, sorry. Peter, is it true that in a race in '58, Formula 2 cars raced along with Formula 1 cars on the same track? Yeah, absolutely. And not just '58, many times. And more, the most recent example of that, I was going to say '69 German Grand Prix. I think we had Formula 2. I mean, often at the Nürburgring, well, many times at the Nürburgring, they had Formula 2 cars because it was a long lap and they were worried that there wasn't enough for the fans to see. You know, they come around every 10 minutes or so. So have more Formula 2 cars and then you a bit more action to watch. So, yeah. And that's where Jackie Ickx made his name in the '67 German Grand Prix in the Formula 2 Tyrrell Matra. Was quick enough. I can't remember precisely, but I think it was 4 cars on the front row, and I think he would have been on the front row with that car, if not the second row of the grid. Of course, in a Formula 2 car, he had to start midfield as the quickest Formula 2 runner. But yeah, they'd had Formula 2 cars. Yeah. And don't forget, 52, 53, Formula 1 effectively was Formula 2. That's why Ferrari did so well, because they had a great Formula 2 car in 1951. And nobody knew where the regulations were going. And so Ferrari basically persuaded the FIA to change Formula 1 regs to Formula 2 and dominated 52, 53 with Alberto Ascari in the Formula 2 car. And then it wasn't until 54 that they went back to the 2.5 litre Formula 1 cars. And of course, Mercedes came in. And unlike Audi, who said they need 5 years to do something, Mercedes came in and won their first race in 54. Audi, please advise. Okay, Oscar Plata, I'm completely wrong here. Says, I believe Byrne is in South Africa doing work on road safety. Oh, well, maybe. I hadn't heard that. It wouldn't surprise me in a way, because he is South African. But last time I spoke to him, which was admittedly a couple of years ago, he was in Thailand still. Right, going back to where we were. Bit of an interlude there, I think. Yeah, let's just see if there's any other super chats. Always important to get to the super chats. So now in Andy Knuckles, great to have you live at this time of the day, Peter. Greetings from Norway. P.S. have high hopes for Alonso this year. Good. Finally to hear somebody talk about Alonso in a positive way. That's good. Claude Casino. About the variable compression ratio, can just the top dome be of a different material? Pass on that one. This is where we need to get somebody who really knows what they're talking about, as distinct from Peter Windsor, when it comes to compression ratios. Is Speed Channel back? I wish it was. No, it's not. It's just a nice jacket. And I have very fond memories of Speed Channel and those days, and everybody involved, and the dinners we used to have afterwards, and David Hobbs telling all these silly jokes, and Sam Posey, and just everything was wonderful. And it was a great thing. It's like all these great things had to end, didn't it? Somebody had to change it all. But it was a very good thing. And I love Speed. It's a good name for a channel too, isn't it? Anyway, this jacket's quite good. I was wearing it out on the golf course today. Rob Hay. Hi, Peter. What percentage does the new regs reset car characteristics? If you're talking car overall, including the power unit, which of course includes the drivetrain, I would say on the basis that Sauber Audi think they need another 5 years to get it right, and they have been in Formula One in terms of Sauber with the chassis for a long time, and they think it's going to take 5 years, that would suggest it's like 100% new thing. But I don't think it is. I think I would say it's, for a team like McLaren, who know what they're doing, team like Mercedes, who know what they're doing, Red Bull, who kind of know what they're doing, Ferrari, that sort of know what they're doing. It's different, obviously, but I would say from McLaren's perspective, let's talk about McLaren because they had the best car last year. They finished with the best car. I would say for them, it's like a 40% change. And they've got, so in other words, 60% of their car can be based around their very, very successful building blocks that they have to take them further ahead or keep them as much in front as they can be. I'm only guessing, but I get that feel talking to the engineers around and about. I haven't actually asked them that specific question, but that's the feel I get. I think if you're Ferrari, you'd probably be saying this is at least 50% chance to get something right here, because 50% of this car is all new in concept and everything. And I don't mean just chassis and engine. I mean 50% also in terms of the aero package of the car. But we'll see. We'll see. Christopher Goodhart says, Peter, I've been working to revive Formula 5000 as a low-cost intercontinental championship, much as Rotax Mac compares to Formula A karting, with a pilot program run in the mold of IROC. Wow, well, good luck with that. Yeah, many fond memories of Formula 5000 and how good that category was. You know, it was lovely cars built by manufacturers like McLaren, Lola, Surtees, you know, Formula One teams in effect, and beautiful cars, and these big rumbling V8 engines, 5-litre V8s, and they were, you know, impressive to watch, impressive to drive. Why did it all change? And in America, the Formula A, I think it was called, was incredibly competitive. Amazing races. Jody Scheckter in the Trojan, and Brian Redman in the Lola. You know, so many. Mario Alonso. What a season that was. And in Australia, we had the Tasman Series for Formula 5000. Mike Hailwood in the David Hobbs, Ron Grable. You know, very, very good drivers. And Peter Gethin was brilliant in the European season. A complete new lease of life for Trevor Taylor, Alan Rollinson. Such a great category, Formula 5000. So good luck with that. I hope it goes well for you. Yeah, Formula 5000. It was a pretty scary series actually to watch. I mean, the cars, bear in mind in those days, the 70s, early 70s, late 60s, the circuits were pretty rustic, and yeah, they were quick cars, very quick. Kane's Cat's Heat again. Which feeder series drivers have impressed you so far in the first few weeks of the winter series? Well, yeah, exactly. I haven't watched those. I've only watched a little bit of the Castrol series in New Zealand. Sorry, too much going on. Ankita Singh says, Lando World Drivers' Championship 26. Good. Well, yeah, he may just sort of relax now. Yeah, okay, Oscar's a bit quicker here. Oscar's doing that, but I'll be all right. And he'll carry on winning, be very relaxed and chilled because he's won his championship. And who knows? Win another one. Could easily happen. Could easily happen. Be ready for it. Be as ready for Lando to win a second Drivers' Championship as you should be for Lance Stroll to win a Grand Prix. There's a comparison for you. So Tomako Road says, howdy race enthusiasts. And then Max790 says, Peter, why does Max get criticised for being aggressive, but the media ignore far more dangerous drivers moving on the straight like Leclerc, Russell on Hamilton at 3:38, Stroll on many occasions? Well, I'm glad you're picking up on the things I've mentioned. Yeah, I mean, that Leclerc move on Max in Spain last year was absolutely ridiculous. And wow, there are so many questions, guys. I'm not going to get through them all. It's embarrassing, actually. I don't know what to do. Why that is, again, you know, British press always had this thing when he came in, Max was dangerous and Max was this. A lot of people very critical of Max, and you know, he had a few moments, didn't he? But equally, he got brake tested by Romain Grosjean at Monaco. It wasn't his fault, and they had other things that they loved to talk about. I think Joss sort of created that sort of aggressive image as well around Max. Everybody started to fear him a bit, and yeah, but you're right. you know, Leclerc's just as guilty of dodgy things like that. And George Russell has his moments too. Definitely. What happened with that shunt at Imola with Valtteri? Yeah. Oscar Plada, and I have to agree with this one. Launches have become more like game introductions. Every year it seems that Formula One is trying to get rid of us that have followed Formula One for 50 years. Yeah, well, you're right. You know, it's just an insult, isn't it? They just sort of, oh, the technology, here's the car, you know, with nothing more said about it. And then you might get a foggy picture of whether it's running pull rod or push rod front suspension or something really innocuous. No talk about the technology at all. It's all talking about branding and logos and livery and nonsense. And it's very frustrating, as I said at the start of the show. Right, another one. I know why this chat thing of mine freezes all the time. It's because there's so many questions. Dare I press clear? I'm going to press no. I don't think I will. I might lose everything if I do that. Next one is from JQ2K. Hi, Peter. I have a model that rates drivers over 76 seasons. Wow. It's loosely based on ideas like the near infamous 40-60 split, mechanical sympathy, and even weather. Is that of interest to you? Well, it is, because it's 76 seasons. And I love the concept of going back well before 1950, when the World Championship began, because I think that in many ways, when we do only begin our research in 1950, it does a disservice to, dare I say it, you know, Tazio Nuvolari, Rudy Caracciola, Kilivazzi, so many great drivers of that period, and I'd love to see how they compare. So, yeah, I should be giving you some sort of email address. I wonder if I wrote it in here. I don't think I did. I'm going to have to put it in the description, an email address to which you can send emails, and I'll look at that. I'd love to see it. I'll put it in the description of this once the video's sitting on the channel and we've finished the live stream. Right, more questions. Another super chat. Hi, Peter. This is from Octe Yelamaz. Hi, Peter, when will Formula One give up 2014 hybrid mistake? We don't go to the space, Peter. We want to hear atmospheric motor voice. Well, according to quite a lot of people on the channel right now, the initial startup sounds of the engine are not bad. So let's hope that the noise is a bit better. But yeah, you know, that whole business switching to hybrid engines in 14, in my view, was a mistake, because Formula One needed to keep its V8s and V10s. V8s we were at that point, because they were noisy, efficient, very equal, and not expensive. And we could have embraced the new era of automotive technology, i.e. electrification, by having Formula One's own Formula E championship over a Grand Prix weekend on a Sunday morning or after qualifying, with those Formula E teams associated with the Formula One teams, with their technology, and some of the Grand Prix drivers even doing some of those Formula E races. And that would have done a massive amount for the next era of automotive technology, but at the same time not touched the V8s that everybody loved. But we didn't do that, and Formula One didn't embrace it, and they let Formula E happen as a separate event with its own TV rights and its own commercial rights. And here we are, trying to do a sort of hybrid version of Formula One, as we hope it'll work. And I agree with you, you know, it's such a shame. Flavio says, I'm wearing glasses and never had a problem with my vision. I drive karts as sharp as ever, but I'm wearing my glasses. Greetings from Switzerland. Love your live streams. Yeah, no, I mean, no problem with anything to do with corrected vision, which spectacles do. But there is a point. I mean, most racing drivers, my peripheral vision, I think, is not bad. I can see, what's that? Yeah, it's 90, maybe just a little bit past 90. But I remember doing that with Carlos once, and he was like back here somewhere with peripheral vision, and Nigel the same. Nigel was even better, I think, than Carlos. Remember him? I did one with him when he was in Formula 3. Unbelievable peripheral vision. And that's my point. You know, when you've got spectacles, they're only going to really correct up to 90 degrees peripheral vision, but they're not going to correct what Formula One drivers have, which is back here somewhere. And you need perfect peripheral vision. That is part of being a Grand Prix driver. So that's why I say peripheral vision is the thing that I would always look at. There's another super chat here, an orange one. Oh, it's the same one. Sorry, mate. Yeah, I've already just done that one. It's all a bit confusing, all this. I'll check this one. Okay, this is. I haven't seen this super chat. This is from Havishandra. No questions, Peter. Saw a driver coach talk about the taboo and egos in Formula One, unlike tennis or football. Also, how Lewis is in Antarctica after the season he had lines up with what you kept saying. Well, is he in Antarctica? Wow, that's good. Sort of thing you do when you retire, I think, isn't it, or not? Lead an expedition to the Antarctica, retrace all the great explorers. But no, good luck to him. I know that's kind of Lewis. He loves nature and he's very good like that. But to me, that isn't the same as being at Snetterton in the wet in a road car, trying to work on a turn-in process that might help him beat Charles Leclerc. There's another super chat here, Tom. Hi, Peter. Do you have any suggestions for videos of top drivers, perhaps from 60s, 70s, in cars that have a pedal and camera that show steering input? Well, right off the bat, the Jim Clark onboard that we have on the channel, we reposted it recently, the full version of the film that Esso made with him. And you can do an onboard lap there with Jimmy in the Lotus 25, and you'll get a feel a little bit for his steering input there. I mean, I have to say, onboard cameras in general, even today, don't give you what you're really talking about, because you've got to have the full perspective, the full peripheral vision of what is happening in front of you in order to get a real feel for the comparison between Max's initial turn in and, say, Fernando Alonso's initial turn in. You've got to see everything. You can't just look at the steering wheel. You've got to see it in relation to everything that's happening. And so it's very difficult, I think, for people. A lot of people do make judgments of drivers based on what they're seeing on and onboard and steering inputs, but they're not seeing the pedals, for example, which are just as important, if not more important, than the handwork. The footwork is absolutely critical, and you never see that. And I mean, for that, one of the best things you could go and look at would be the movie Grand Prix and the early scenes of that. There's a lot of really good footwork stuff there, and it's Phil Hill and it's Jonathan Williams, I think, two very quick drivers. You're seeing footwork from there. So, yeah. Going back now to Rory Byrne, Luke the Truth says Rory Byrne has retired. He's in South Africa, though he did consulting work for developing the SF24. But I wonder whether they got in touch with him for the 26 car. Knowing Rory, he probably is doing something. Yeah, somebody saying pedal cam. Yeah, well, we'd love to have pedal cams, but they'll never happen because I'm told they need too much. The lighting you need for a pedal cam to work requires too much space, and none of the teams are prepared to give that space away. Even though, of course, if the regulations required it, everyone would be in the same boat and we'd all have much better television. But nobody ever goes down that path. It's very annoying, but there you go. Luke the Truth says Silverstone and Kota are the best circuits for racing. These two give options for alternate lines for drivers in the race. And this year with boost overtake modes, racing is going to be mega. Yeah, but if you exclude any overtake that's due to having an excess of power, or any defense that's due to having an excess of power, what overtakes are you talking about? I mean, you can't call an overtake just because the guy's suddenly got, I don't know, 100 horsepower more than the other bloke. That's not an overtake. How can you call that racing mega? That's not mega. That's just pathetic slot car. I don't know what it is. I mean, slot car racing is better than that. No, an overtake is an overtake when a driver earns it through being quicker and doing a better job with time management or positioning of the car, use of the throttle, use of the brakes, all those things that are important. Not just because he's artificially got 100 horsepower more. How can that be called an overtake? I know what's going to happen. There are going to be lots of people saying, 150 overtakes. Formula One's never been better. Yeah, well, let's define an overtake before we do this, please. In fact, that's what we're going to have to do with poor old Mark Slade, who's going to be our strategy expert this year. We're going to have to say, Mark, and Corey for that matter, because he loves all these overtaking, listing them all. We're going to have to define a proper overtake as distinct from an artificial overtake. Good, that's settled. And that applies also to active aero. Makes life difficult, doesn't it? So where are we going now? Jim Clark says, it's Andalusian internet. I have exactly the same problems. not quite sure what that means, but anyway, I hope this internet's working well. I'm on the hard line thing, and it seems to be okay. Loving the continuous Audi slander. Well, I hope it's not slander. I hope I haven't said anything that's actually slanderous. I've just been opinionated about, you know, some of the words they're using to describe the way they built the car. Audi is never last, they're saying. Okay, except for a DNF. All right, okay. And Luke's predicting the order of the first race: Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin, Alpine, Haas, Williams, Audi, Cadillac, RBR, Racing Bulls. I know I'm acting like crazy. Why do you think Racing Bulls are going to be so slow? That doesn't make sense to me. Who have they got? Liam Lawson and Young Arbid, haven't they? They should be all right. Liam will drive pretty well this year, I think, with a bit of, he'll have a bit of seniority feel to the way he gets out of bed in the morning, and he'll be a little bit more circumspect, and he'll find a little bit more of a groove that he can operate in. I think he'll do quite well. Do you think Senna would have kept on racing until 2000, says Wombat, asks Wombat. I don't actually know, because I think he actually had a very low threshold of pain, and he was usually in pain in a Grand Prix or at the end of a Grand Prix, and it was getting worse, not better, even in a good car. And so I think he would have, you know, he would have had a problem with the back or something like that. And don't forget, he did have that paralysis thing as well. So yeah, I think physically, I think he would have raced for another couple of years max. Luke the Truth says, I don't know why Red Bull did fire Horner, the centerpiece. If RBPT midway 25, it doesn't look good for Red Bull Ford. Yeah, well, they did, and he's not irreplaceable, and they haven't done a bad job since then. And you know, we'll see how they go this year before we really, you know, talk about Red Bull and how they're going to survive without Adrian Newey. I mean, that was much more of a thing for them to lose Adrian. It's a much bigger thing than to lose Christian Horner, for sure. David Joklotz says, hi Peter, Jacques Villeneuve spoke about driver's approach and essentially mirrored what you say with regards to data versus the driver's feel in the car. He said using data as the primary is misguided. Yeah, well, good on Jack for saying that. And I'm not surprised, because he was quite a feel driver, and as was his dad, Gilles. And I think he's right. And as far away as I am from really understanding anything to do with tournament golf, I would say that there are some golfers out there that could benefit from less emphasis on yardages, calculating this and calculating that, and spin speeds and apex heights and all the technology that comes into golf now, and golfers who just feel the shot and hit it based on what's in front of them. And I think it's, you know, Scotty Scheffler's a good example of that. You know, he's not massively into all that technology, and I think it's the same with race drivers. I think there's a lot to be said for feel and touch. And just as a reminder, and I've said this, I've told this story before, but when Carlos Reutemann came back to Williams a while ago now, obviously it was a while ago, but Williams had a pretty good simulator up and running by then, and they put Carlos in the simulator lap of Monaco, and after one lap he said, get me out of this, I can't drive, I just feel horrendous in this, the hairs on my arms are standing up, this is so foreign to what I want to feel in a racing car, I don't even want to go near it. And Carlos was one of the ultimate touch feel short corner drivers, one of the best I've ever seen. All feel and vision and touch, but none of it was digital. And that's what I think a lot of the problems with the, you know, when people ask how good is Arvid, it's so difficult to say, because he's in this digital era now when a lot of the digits will probably say, yeah, he's good at this, on the sim he's doing that, yeah. But how much actual feel has he got? We were talking earlier about the difference between Vettel and Max. And, you know, Vettel had that sort of very regimented V approach, whereas Max is all curves and feel and touch, the suppleness. And that's nothing that you will ever get from a simulator or learn from a simulator or from looking at telemetry. That's all touch and feel. And you either got it or you haven't, really, to some extent, at that level, in defining the level that defines the difference between Vettel and Verstappen, which is absolutely at the top of our profession. Don't get me wrong, Vettel, absolutely brilliant racing driver in many, many ways. But the difference between Vettel and Max was what I just described. And that is, that is touch and feel. Dr. 01 says, I hope it's going to be Audi this year. They have a good track record in a lot of motorsport categories they've entered in the past. Yeah, and let's add to that, they've also got an engine regulation tailor-made for their success, because we don't have MGUHs anymore on the car, purely because Audi said all our success with our engines in previous categories was we didn't have an MGUH. We don't know how to build them. We don't know how to run them. So we don't want them. Please take them out of the Formula One regs. And so Formula One did. So if Audi don't have an engine that's right up there, they should be ashamed of themselves, in my opinion. And all this business about should take 5 years to succeed, again, nonsense. Wellanders Fullo. What are the engine regs going to look like beyond 2030? Are we going to see the Pat Simmons 60% thermal efficiency target with even less energy fuel flow, even a V4 long term as the V6 is already oversized? I don't know. I don't even want to think about it. It gives me a headache thinking about that, because I'd just like to go back to V8s. Thank you very much. Or maybe Formula 5000 engines. I don't know. I remember doing a chat with Pat Simmons once. We were doing a talk somewhere, and it was when the Toyota Prius had been out for 4 or 5 years, and it was sort of, the hybrid car that was taking the world by storm. And Pat was saying, well, I call that the Toyota Pious, because it's complete nonsense. The system they have is completely sidestepping the issue and blah, blah, blah. I never really understood that, actually, because for me, the Toyota hybrid system is actually very efficient because it's heat and energy, is it not? Anyway, he said it was rubbish. So I have to assume that Pat knows what he's talking about. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't want to see Formula One going down those paths, to be honest. I think it's a sport, and I think it's a spectacular sport, and I think it looks great. It looked great up until now. We don't know what it's going to look like in 26. And I think we've got about as far as we want to go. Thank you very much. Let's go back to making it even more spectacular with louder, noisier engines. And if you're worried about the image of the technology, do another category that can race over the Grand Prix weekend with Formula One drivers in those cars, as I've said a million times. So, David Jackoltz, he used Verstappen and science as good examples. He gave Jock Clear the kudos for teaching him this approach. Not quite sure what approach we're talking about now. I need to go back to, what was that all about? The previous question from you was not saying things couldn't have been done better, faster, but as well hindsight. I think we're talking about the whole feel and touch and feel thing. Yeah, good. Well, Jock's a good bloke, such a good bloke that Ferrari got rid of him. So there you go. Another good guy. 2 good guys I can think of right now who aren't where they should be. One is Jock Clear, who's very good on the pit wall, clear head, understands the art of driving a racing car very well and how to help young drivers. And B, Tom McCullough, another one, very good on the pit wall, good racer. So Aston Martin moved him sideways away from the race team. I imagine Adrian will realise that fairly soon and get him back. I'll be surprised if he doesn't. Taylor 80277. Hi Peter, I once watched a documentary where Joe Ramirez dismissed Mansell as ever being a threat. I thought this was very unfair. Do you have any more insight into this? Not really, no. It doesn't surprise me. And Joe had his guys and his people, and I really was totally into him when he was. He was totally into Pedro and Ricardo Rodriguez, as I was. So on that basis, I became very close to Joe. But I think because Joe then at McLaren became very Ayrton focused, and because Ayrton was always trashing Nigel, as he always did, to Frank, to everybody, anyone would listen, he would always trash Nigel, then Joe probably just caught it from Ayrton, I imagine. That's all that was. Oh, another driver that Joe was into, of course, was Francois Sever. He was Francois' #1 mechanic, and so I also had spent many a happy hour with Joe talking about Francois. And of course, he was brilliant because he wasn't #1 on Jackie Stewart's car. He was on Sever's car, and Roger Hill was #1 on Jackie's car. But when Carlos Reutemann asked me at Williams, when he joined Williams, to see if I could get him a Jackie Stewart type Tyrrell gear lever knob, I went to Joe and said, "Can you try and get one?" And he sort of sneaked it out the back door. And Carlos thereafter had that one gear lever knob, beautifully machined in that artificial wood. I've forgotten what it's called now. And it wasn't just an upright knob. It went away, so it fitted perfectly in the palm of the hand here. And it was the one Jackie had. And Carlos always had that same one. Thanks to Joe Ramirez. So thanks, Joe, for that. AD Mateo. Hello from Romania. Hi there. Great country. That's what we should have. The jet engine invented in Romania. Bring back the Lotus 56 turbine. Thanks for the videos. All the best. Thank you very much. 964 Cup Love says that Audi presentation was a load of brouhaha and advertising waffle. I wish Formula One would go back to the 60s or 70s. Yeah, well, you know, and the press launches then were great. And I'm thinking, you know, Lotus 77. I remember it was at Heathrow Airport and we all went there and there was Colin and Ralph Bellamy and Ronnie and Mario, and we would all, Colin made a short speech and then he just talked to everybody, wandered around, chatting to everybody, explaining everything about the car. Isn't that what a launch is all about? Instead of all this nonsense. What is it again? I've got to read this because it's absolute classic, isn't it? Audi's new design philosophy: clear, technical, intelligent, emotional. Who came up with all that waffle? It's just ridiculous, isn't it? C. Taylor's being naughty here. Do you still think Piastri should have stayed at Alpine? I think you just press copy and repeat. You asked me that in the last one, or somebody else did, and I gave a long answer. I'm not going to do another one. And if you didn't hear it, I think I've also written it in the channels thing as well, you know, the community thing. Will we ever see, Luke says, will we ever see a Charles versus Max battle? I'm sure when Charles starts dominating, Max will not have the car. George is also in the elite league. Hopefully in 27, a title battle between these three. Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think Charles, as I said, I would put him number 2 in the world right now alongside Max, and I'd have George probably 3, Lando 4, Oscar somewhere there. You know, where's Fernando? Where's Lewis? I definitely have Fernando in the top 10. I mean, I think somebody did a top 10 recently without Fernando, which is insane. But you'd put Lewis in there as well. And yeah, you know, but Charles, very, very good. What happened to Nigel in Lotus? Why was he behind DeAngelis? Or was he? I don't think he was. He was quicker than DeAngelis. And which era are you talking about? Are you talking about 84 when Peter War was running it? Or are you talking about prior to that? And, you know, one of the reasons he was, I mean, he was quicker than Elio. I mean, what can I say? He was quicker than Elio, so you're wrong there. And yes, he had a lot of issues and a lot of problems with the car. The car was uncompetitive. He was out for quite a lot of time when he broke his wrist in Canada, a shunt with Giacomelli, I think it was. But whenever Nigel was one-on-one with Elio, he was quicker. And yeah, you know, Elio was very Carlos Sainz-y, but Nigel was up there with Max in terms of his pace, unbelievably quick. So I'm not quite sure about the question there. Berger got a great win in 97. Yeah, he did. Berger won some good races. Also pretty dirty too. You know, had that moment with Nigel. We talked about moments on the straight. What about Berger taking Nigel out in the 1990 San Marino Grand Prix when Gerhard's back at McLaren and Nigel's alongside him on the straight after Tamburello, and Gerhard just moves over on him. Nigel does a 360 on the grass and rejoins, still going pretty quickly, and then sets his own personal fastest lap a lap later. And then passes Berger around the outside of the last corner in Mexico, and Pirotella, I think it was called, and to the embarrassment of Gerhard, really, on the outside there. And as they came down the pit lane at the end of that race, the entire pit lane, they're not looking at Alan Prost, the winner. They're all looking up the pit lane. And I think we should tell Isaac Hadjar that, because he was going on about Alan's drive in Mexico. But I mean, the drive of the day there was Nigel Mansell, because they were all looking up the pit lane for Nigel to come in. And the entire pit lane just clapped Nigel as he drove down the pit lane. Even those that thought that Elio was quicker. Of course, shouldn't be saying that, because of course he wasn't around then. Poor Elio. I loved watching Elio drive. He's a very elegant driver, and loved hanging out with him too. Great guy. Was it? This is from Taylor 80277. Was it true that Senna was unhappy at Williams and was planning a move to Ferrari? I've read this in a few books. The claims were that Senna struggled with the culture at Williams. Any truth in this? I think he loved Frank, and he was very close to Frank, and they'd spent many close years long before he joined Williams. And I think Ayrton was disappointed, obviously, with the car that year, and I think he was he frustrated at Williams? I mean, I wasn't at Williams at the time, but I'm putting a few dots together there and hoping they make sense. And that is that if he felt, as we talked at the start of the show, that the Benetton had traction control and Williams obviously didn't, he probably felt a bit disappointed that Williams didn't, I would imagine. And if Benetton were getting away with it, why weren't Williams? I would imagine that was one thing. And secondly, the car was quite tight for him, and it was, I think, not a particularly comfortable cockpit for him, which might have added to a little bit of that. And beyond that, it wasn't a very easy car to drive, as Adrian admitted very soon, well, soon afterwards, but has admitted they got something slightly wrong with the aero at the back, which they rectified halfway through the year, sadly after Ayrton had gone, and the car became pretty good after that. But up to that point, they didn't really know what the problem was, and they hadn't found it. And I guess Ayrton probably in that time was probably quite frustrated by that, and that the car just didn't feel very good. And he had that weird spin in Brazil and slow speed and stalled it. And I mean, he at any given moment, he would have been getting offers from Ferrari throughout his career from 84 onwards, and from virtually every other Formula One team, like any good Grand Prix driver, as Max probably gets offers from Ferrari every other day. So nothing new there. Was he thinking of leaving Williams? I'm pretty sure that if the Williams had, I mean, if he'd lived, he would have enjoyed the second half of 94, and I think he probably would have stayed and would have gone on to win world championships, more world championships. Yeah, I'm starting to sort of jump a couple now because I'm going to have to get going. I'm just trying to sort of, Luke, it's asked a lot of questions, Luke, but I'm giving you sort of free pass on this one because I haven't really found a way of policing the number of questions we all ask. But anyway, it's good questions from everybody. These regs do give a lot of tactical freedom to drivers. Like drivers may choose to charge at certain corners and tack at others. Also, the overtake mode is not as simple as it seems. Yeah, but that choice is being given to them artificially. They're not earning that choice by doing a better job under braking or with the use of the throttle or turn-in or the way they're using the steering wheel. That's my point. Of course, there are going to be a lot more options. That's a given. And the overtake mode may be difficult, and it may be something that some drivers get on top of and some teams very early on. But so what? That's not part of motor racing. That's not part of driving a racing car. That's a completely separate thing. It's like driving a road car and being very good at working out how to use the screen and the hi-fi. It's nothing to do with driving the car and the sound system. It's a completely separate thing. Yeah, it adds up to overtaking, but it's banal, artificial overtaking, so it doesn't count, in my opinion. Dr. O1 again. Talking to Wellens, another one. 1 year Ferrari, 2 years Honda, and 2 years Mercedes, what I remember. I don't think you can really, I think you're talking about how long it took them to get going. And I think you can't really relate what happened in the past to what's happening in 26. It is different. Although, as I keep saying, you know, Audi should be aware that Mercedes and Auto Union actually were very quick out of the box. Auto Union didn't take 5 years to get their car operating. They were running pretty quickly within 3 months, as far as I remember. So, quite sure going on. Luke, the truth, I think Kimi Antonelli is a serious talent. There are certain areas of tracks where he's just brilliant. Yeah, circuits with predominantly slow corners and moving up to medium speed, I think he is brilliant. I'm not sure he's as good as George on fast corners. I think that's his issue. He's got better, and I'm not saying he won't continue to get better, but I don't think he's in the class of Max or Charles on fast corners, or George for that matter. And that's going to be, but there aren't many circuits these days where fast corners, there are circuits with fast corners, but there aren't that many circuits where fast corners are critical to being quick over the lap. A little bit like Tabac. as how critical is speed through to back, relative speed through to back, to the lap of Monaco. That's what I'm confused about. Going back to that to back thing, I'm still thinking about it actually. Anyway, one more question. Suspense 911. That's a good name to finish with, I think. I so agree with you, Peter, that drivers should be scouted from being at the circuits, watching them drive, and not timesheets and PR. Well, absolutely right. Thank you for that. And it's not just a question of agreeing with me. I think it's reality. You know, of course it's the case, but the teams are so orientated to money that the scouting at a kart meeting these days is as much about seeing which quick kartists have got the biggest motorhomes, i.e. the wealthiest dads, as it is about who's actually doing what on track. And that's where it all starts. And it continues to go from there. And as I say, 2 million for Formula 3, 3 million for Formula 2. No wonder the standard of driving has to be brought into question, because how can you evaluate it when it's not based on talent? It's not really based on talent. There will always be a couple of talented drivers in there. And I think Leo is one of them, last year's F2 champion, but Buonarroti. But I don't think the standard midfield of driving is as high as it could be and should be, given the so-called Formula One driver academies there are everywhere, because the Formula One academies are pretty much based on money and not based on proper instruction of the type we've been talking about. So there we go. Thank you very much. Just gone 15 minutes over the 2 hours. I try to make it 2 hours. Always goes a little bit over, but anyway, I want to reiterate the point. You know, without you, there would be no show. And I'm just scrolling down now at all the questions I'm not getting to, which is very annoying for me and probably as much for you as well. All I can say is I will try to get to some questions as well, probably tomorrow, because I'm a bit knackered now, on the community section, to get through some of the questions that I didn't get to now. And we'll be continuing to do these live streams because they're just wonderful. And thank you very much, everyone who's joined us. Wonderful to have your input and your thoughts going into 2026. And guess what? When we do a live stream next week, the cars will have run behind closed doors in Barcelona. Yeah, well, we'll see what happens there. Thanks for watching. See you soon.